Marvel. Awakening Words, Follow the Law, and Defeat Thanos. Chapter 61. Lynn at the moment, looking at Hydra Emily in front of her. I couldn't help but want to direct the actual combat performance method, so I killed it. Otherwise, how hard it was to save Pepper, how could Tony willingly build a steel armor for himself? Well, you need to pay attention to how to send a favor, and the effect of blunt sending is very low. Just as Lynn and Emily were testing sentence after sentence, Tony grew impatient. He kept cursing Obadiah just now, but the other party did not regret it, but justified it. Suddenly Tony felt extremely helpless and angry. Thinking of saving Pepper first, he shouted directly. Emily, just start trading. You give me Pepper. I give you the power core technology. Said and gave Lynn a look. Lynn saw this and took out the black USB flash drive in his hand. Then Tony continued. Just in case, we each sent one person to hand over. Give technology with one hand, teach hostages with one hand. Hydra. Emily heard this and said with a smile. Tony, the people are in our hands now. Oh too. If you don't give me the technology, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Saying that, he gave a look at a Hydra agent in a black special battle suit next to him. The other party immediately took out the pistol, strode forward, and pressed against the back of Pepper's head. Tony saw this with panic in his eyes, but he held back what he wanted to say and didn't do anything. This was what Lynn had expected. Even without this scene, he felt sorry for the name Hydra. He and Tony have repeatedly stressed that in such a scene, there should be no action, everything is communicated by Lynn, otherwise the worst scene will easily occur. Seeing this, Lynn said coldly immediately. Emily, this transaction is done with great sincerity. According to your statement, I guess, it is very likely that you have finished the technology and killed the hostage directly by the way. If that's the case, it's better not to trade. I believe that, in the eyes of anyone, the value of energy core technology is far higher than Ms. Pepper. If that's the case, don't blame us for breaking up. Lynn said, took out the U-disc in his hand and made a gesture, wanting to crush it. Emily saw Lynn's slow movements and didn't say a word, but Lynn didn't stop either. Just when the U-disc has begun to have slight cracks and a slight cracking sound. Emily couldn't help but said loudly. Okay, I promise you. However, let's inspect the goods first. In Emily's mind, Pepper might indeed have a place in Tony's mind, but it was Lynn who held the USB stick in his hand. From what they know about Lynn, it's very likely that they will end up in one shot. For the most critical energy core technology of the steel armor, he could only agree to Lynn's request. To be honest, she really wanted to kill Pepper first, and then sent someone to kill all of Tony, especially Lynn. I tried to kill it before, but it was unsuccessful because of S.H.I.E.L.D. The timing was just right this time. By the way, you can also get evidence of intimidating Obadiah. The looting plan was also considered a complete success. Pity. Here comes Lynn, a smiling tiger. Don't compromise a little bit, I'm afraid it will be endless today. Lynn nodded slightly in satisfaction when she heard Emily's reply. Then, give the security guard next to you a look. Seeing this, the security personnel directly took out a computer and inserted the USB flash drive in front of everyone. Reached out to signal, the other party sent someone to come over to check briefly. Seeing this, Emily asked a middle-aged man in a white coat standing next to him to move forward. At the same time, Lynn also asked the security guard next to him to walk in the direction of Pepper. The two sides cooperated very well. One looked at the computer and flipped through the information, while the other took off the cloth head that Pepper put in his mouth, trying to comfort Pepper, who was a little panicked. After a short while, the people from both sides nodded, indicating that there was no problem. In this regard, Leanne directly said loudly. Now, let's exchange. Emily also glanced at Obadiah and saw him nodded slightly, so she said in a deep voice. It is good. The voice fell, and the two parties sent people, one with a USB flash drive, and the other with Pepper, ready to answer their own safe range. Just when the two were about to return, Hydra Emily and Lynn's eyes flashed fiercely, and roar was high at the same time. Go. The moment the voice fell, Lynn quickly silently recited the word defense. Almost instantly, a pale yellow light instantly enveloped Lynn, Pepper and the others. At the same time, bang, bang, bang. The light yellow defense cover instantly rose a faint wave, and a large number of bullets fell from the outside of the defense cover. Seeing this, Tony put on his mask and rushed towards Obadiah. Obadi didn't dare to fall behind, and directly drove the Iron Overlord towards Tony, waving his huge mechanical arm. Lin glanced at it and stopped paying too much attention. At the moment when he shouted to do it, the staff in 510 downstairs had already begun to do it. With the sound of gunshots, a fierce battle began. It has to be said that HYDRA's agent ability training is still very good. In the face of the Blackstone Special Forces team that has undergone the strengthening, it can still support it with its geographical advantages. When Lin saw this, he turned his head and spit out 2 words at Pepper. Calm. At the moment when the voice fell, Pepper, who was originally fearful and panicked, was enveloped by a light green energy, and his expression began to become somewhat peaceful. Lin looked at Haibai, who had calmed down, showing a faint smile, then turned to look at the USB flash drive in Emily HYDRA's hand, and said plainly. Broken. The moment the voice fell, Emily saw with her own eyes that the USB flash drive in her hand was torn apart instantly, and it was of no use value at all. Immediately, his gaze towards Lin was full of horror, and then he subconsciously took out his pistol and kept shooting in Lin's direction. Lin didn't do anything either, watching the bullets keep being blocked by the light yellow protective cover and falling to the ground. Right at the moment. Sudden. A black figure rushed towards Lin, waving his right arm. It was a silver-white arm like metal, and there was a red 5-pointed star on the arm. Exactly Winter Soldier. I saw Winter Soldier vigorously swinging his right arm, which was covered in metal casting, constantly hitting the pale yellow shield. Bang! 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 Lin kept hearing violent noises not far away, and his face sank. He could feel that the defensive cover he had cast was close to being shattered after the previous round of attacks and Winter Soldier's powerful attack. It can be seen by the naked eye that a large number of cracks have appeared in the light yellow defense cover. At the same time, Frank, who was waiting on the side, saw this scene and raised the specially made firearm in his hand. Start shooting Winter Soldier continuously. The firearm has been specially developed, with the blessing of Frank's powerful fire ability. Immediately, every bullet emitted a crimson light, containing powerful energy. Keep shooting the area around Winter Soldier. Seeing this, Winter Soldier stopped attacking the shield. Begin to keep covering the flame bullets with your arms. Then, he strode towards Frank, trying to kill this obstacle in advance. At the moment, the defensive cover was on the verge of being broken, and then several bullets kept hitting the cracked defensive cover. Boom. The shield is broken. Lin glanced at this and saw Frank, who gave up shooting and was fighting Winter Soldier in close quarters. Squinting, as if thinking about something, she looked at Emily, who had a smile on her face. Said unhurriedly. Here, no shooting. In an instant, the entire floor, the original gunshots stopped abruptly. Emily's expression froze, and she kept trying to shoot bullets with her own pistol, but found that it was useless. Seeing this, the members of the Blackstone Special Forces squad who were fighting underneath, directly inserted the firearms in their hands into their legs, and drew out the long knives around their waists. With a few gestures, he charged towards the enemy extremely skillfully. Well, in this scene, Lin specially let Frank and the others train, and even asked them to train more. Sometimes, all people have to follow the ability restrictions when speaking out. In this case, whoever can adapt in advance will have a great advantage. Just like at the moment, firearms are completely unusable and can only be engaged through cold weapons. Emily tried several times and looked at the completely ineffective firearm. Her face became more and more ugly. Immediately, he directly inserted the pistol back into his waist, and then pulled out the dagger on his leg. Take a few Hydra agents next to you and kill Lin directly. Seeing this, Lin showed a faint smile on his face, looking at Emily and the others who were getting closer and closer, and spit out 2 words lightly. Stay still. The moment the words fell, under the extremely horrified eyes of Emily and the others, they held daggers and galloped forward, and they stopped abruptly. Not moving at all. Only the eyeballs can shake slightly, the others seem like a sculpture. Lin glanced at Emily and the others who looked like statues, and then looked at the surprised eyes of Pepper and others, with a faint smile on her face. Afterwards, looking at Flake, who was fighting with Winter Soldier, he asked loudly with some playfulness. Frank, do you need help? While exercising his flame ability, a faint red flame glowed all over his body. Frank, who was holding a flaming sword, replied loudly without turning his head. Boss, no need, I haven't fought such a hilarious battle for a long time, let me move my muscles and muscles more. As he said that, as if he felt that the fight was not enjoyable enough, he threw away the red long knife in his hand. With his fist full of red flames, he directly started to slam against Winter Soldier. With his extremely rich combat experience and strong physical fitness blessed by flames, he has been entangled with Winter Soldier. Listening to the fierce battle on Frank's side, Lin nodded slightly in satisfaction. Then, squinting, he kept looking at the moving shadows in the sky far away. You can see Iron Man and Iron Overlord fighting fiercely in the air. Then, he walked over to Pepper, whose expression had basically remained stable, and said comfortingly. Pepper, rest assured, the situation is under control now. The rest, just wait until Tony beats Obadiah and we can go home. Hearing Lin's soothing tone, the worried look on Pepper's face lightened slightly, but he still asked hesitantly. Lin, thank you so much this time, but Tony's side. Will it be? Seeing Pepper's hesitant tone, Lin smiled slightly and took out his phone. Commanded to Vera. Vera, bring up Tony's fight scene. The moment the voice fell, Iron Man and Iron Overlord suddenly appeared on the phone screen fighting fiercely in the downtown area. At the same time, a large number of New Yorkers fled to the surroundings. At the moment Tony has a slight upper hand. Hand it to Pepper, and after seeing it, Pepper can clearly see that Pepper's face is much more stable. At the moment, the special forces downstairs, who had basically ended, reached the roof one after another and stood not far away, watching the scene of Frank and Winter Soldier fighting with each other. Well, it looks like Frank's playing is really cool. Otherwise the special forces won't be standing by and watching. And Winter Soldier saw this, without any hesitation, and kept attacking with one punch and one kick. Tactical gestures such as resisting, attacking, retreating, defending and so on are constantly emerging. Demonstrating a wealth of combat experience, Frank is not to be outdone, accumulating experience by virtue of his massive battles. Demonstrated a sense of beauty, money, in battle for everyone present. After playing for a while, all of a sudden, Winter Soldier hit Frank directly, and Frank made a defensive gesture to block it. Seeing this, Winter Soldier took advantage of this and ran directly into the distance. Mission failed, must report back. When Lin saw this, a faint smile appeared on her face, and she spit out two words. Still. The moment the words fell, the Winter Soldier, who had just bounced into the air, remained motionless and landed on the ground like a sculpture. Bang it! With a loud noise, all the members of the Blackstone Special Forces, including Frank, directly surrounded them. Seeing this, Frank shook his head slightly, as if he hadn't had a good time just now. Seeing this, Lin also strode forward, looking at Winter Soldier, who was lying on the ground in a jumping position, with a faint smile on his face. This pose is quite strange. Ha ha. Finally, he bowed his head in thought. Lin looked at the motionless Winter Soldier on the ground, a little hesitant. Winter Soldier's combat ability is not weak, and if it is blessed with words and deeds, it can definitely become the top combat power of the company. Moreover, his inner sense of morality and justice is not very strong. Very much in line with the company's solicitation standards. 18. Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes has a very special identity. Not to mention the strong bond between Winter Soldier Bucky and the United States Captain Rogers, and even his own father, Tyler Duncan. Let's start with the fact that Bucky was sent by Hydra to kill Stark's parents. Enough to bury the seeds of a huge hidden danger behind. Lin thought of the scene where Tony knew the truth and went to his company to kill Winter Soldier. Suddenly shook his head, it is really not desirable. It's like handing a knife to Hydra. Originally, the relationship between the two was not bad. If they did this, it would be easy for the two to fall apart, and it would be impossible for them to fight directly, and even Stark Industry and Xingyao Group would start a war. The impact of this is also extremely bad. Did someone use the Winter Soldier thing to directly cause the Avengers to split? It is not impossible for someone to manipulate Starlight Company through the matter of Winter Soldier. Although Lin is sure to directly suppress Tony, but why is this? Tony's genius brain is the envy of 823 Lin. In the future, he will even use this genius brain to develop a time-traveling machine. Even if Tony is guaranteed not to die, it is very possible to develop a machine that shuttles through the multi-universe. At that time, he. Therefore, it is impossible to accept Winter Soldier directly. It is absolutely impossible to let Winter Soldier return to Hydra's hands. As for killing Winter Soldier, when he thought of the future, the captain of the United States went directly to his Xingyao group to make trouble, and he felt a lot of trouble. Don't believe Hydra's integrity. If he really dares to do this, he will definitely end up in the hands of the captain of the United States. Looking at it this way, this Winter Soldier is simply a hot potato. Not to receive, nor not to receive. You can't even kill it. If you don't kill it, it's even more troublesome to put it back. Hey. Lin sighed inwardly, then began to ponder specific solutions again. After a while, a glint flashed in Lin's eyes. He thought of the best way. Send him to the captain of the United States. This ACFI hot potato is left to the United States Captain Rogers. He doesn't stick. In short, with his words, he can definitely wake up Winter Soldier's sober consciousness, and even give him a certain transcendent ability. When the time comes, send him to Rogers, Captain of the United States. If he can wake up Rogers before S.H.I.E.L.D., then by virtue of his identity as the son of his comrade in arms. Although Lin has no confidence to keep Rogers in the Shining Star group, he can at least let Rogers be on his side. When the time comes, whether it is negotiating with the military or negotiating with S.H.I.E.L.D. Not sure. With the help of this, the share price of Xingyao Group can be raised by another level. You know, the appeal of the United States Captain Rogers, in terms of the entire United States, can be called the top. This is the result of a country's continuous edification for decades. Even if Rogers wanted to be president, he would undoubtedly have the support of the majority. Tut tut. Thinking about it this way, Winter Soldier is really useful. By rescuing Bucky from Hydra and awakening Winter Soldier, he will definitely gain the favor of the Captain of the United States. Thinking of this, Lin directly instructed the fighters next to him. Let them take it away, put it in the car, and use it in the back. Immediately afterwards, he pointed to the east on the ground and said unhurriedly. This person, arrange it in a good voice, it will be very useful later. After Frank heard it, he immediately ordered everyone to start working. Ignoring the angry eyes of Emily and the others. Directly hold one in each hand and tuck it under the waist. Take Emily and other Hydra agents downstairs and put them in the trunk of the vehicle. Tut tut. Seeing this, Lin has a feeling of being stubborn. After the matter was almost over, he said slowly to Pepper, who had been watching Tony's battle video beside him. Pepper, it's almost over now, let's go and find Tony. With that said, Lin glanced at Tony, who had the upper hand on the phone screen. Well, as expected, Iron Man's combat power is quite good. Finally, Pepper walked very quickly to the person, urging Lin to hurry up and find Tony. Well, it seems that the relationship between the two is about to heat up again. Seeing this, Lin showed a helpless look, then took Pepper directly downstairs, got into the car, reported a location, and the driver drove quickly. Time passed slowly. After 10 minutes, the speeding vehicle began to slow down slowly. Pepper stuck his head out of the window and looked at the two steel armors that were fighting fiercely in the air not far away. One was huge and the other was skinny. The two kept fighting fiercely. From time to time, white lasers would shoot out, and the surroundings were basically deserted. Everyone either fled the area or hid in the house. Afterwards, Pepper seemed to think of something, pulled Lin's clothes sitting next to him, and motioned to hurry up and help. She didn't forget that Lin had extraordinary ability and could definitely help a lot. Lin made a helpless expression, looking at the Iron Man who had the upper hand, and the Iron Overlord who fell behind. Under Pepper's gaze, he said lightly. Machine out of control. The moment the words fell, it was visible to the naked eye that the Iron Overlord carried by Obadiah suddenly burst out with multiple black smoke. Tony's Mark I was stunned for a moment, as if thinking of something, he quickly raised his hands and fired a laser. Take advantage of his illness and kill him. Then, after a few moments, the Iron Overlord, who had obstacles all over his body, was directly unplugged by Iron Man. Totally defeated. A large number of people around saw this scene and rushed out excitedly. Go roar Iron Man, Robot Man, etc. called roar. Afterwards, Lin saw Tony control the Mark I to fly directly into the sky, heading towards the Stark villa. At the same time, the phone at hand began to ring. After picking it up, he realized that it was Tony's. After saying a few words, he hung up. Ordered the driver to bring himself and Pepper to Stark Villa. 3 days later, New York, Stark Villa. At the moment Lin is sitting in the living room of the villa with a newspaper in hand, and Pepper next to him picks up some fruits and puts them on the table in the living room. Lin looked at Tony who was walking down the stairs, waved, winked at Pepper, and said jokingly, "Look, our Iron Man has arrived." With that said, Lin walked towards Tony with the newspaper in his hand. The newspapers were written in bold letters. Shock. Tony Stark himself as Iron Man. Lin walked up to Tony and waved the newspaper in his hand, looking at Tony's face without embarrassment. Said in a bit of a funny way, "Tony, call me, what's the matter?" "Impossible, there will be another party tonight." Having said that, Lin turned his head to look at Pepper, then to Tony, with a hint of wink, said. Tony stumbles when he hears Lin's words, then takes a peek at Pepper, the look in the eyes of Pepper. He said to Lien Junction, "I'm looking for you for something important, a party or something, and I'm not interested in holding it lately. Don't mention it again." Hearing Tony's serious tone, he looked at the look in his eyes again. Tut tut. Lin sighed a little, it seems that Pepper should have completely won Tony. That's right, he took Pepper back to the Stark villa that day, and he drove himself away at night. It seems that there was a story that night. Tut tut. Immediately, Lin didn't ponder further, he was quite curious about the purpose of Tony's invitation to him. Without waiting for Lin to ask questions, Tony directly motioned to Lin and followed him upstairs. Lin followed curiously. Going upstairs, Tony walked directly to the computer and asked directly to Lin in front of him. "What color do you prefer? What kind of look do you like?" Asking questions while fiddling with the computer. Lin was quite excited when he saw this. Looking at this posture, this was Tony customizing his steel armor. Replied immediately. "I like the starry sky blue with the bright stars." About styling. As the two kept asking and answering, Tony kept modifying the image in the computer. After a short while, the two officially ended the question and answer process. Seeing this, Lin asked curiously, "Is this a custom-made steel armor for me?" Tony looked up, nodded helplessly, and said lightly, "I made it so obvious, you still ask. Let's see, is this image okay?" With that said, Tony turned the computer around a little and put it in front of Lin. Lin looked at the computer with some excitement. This is a steel armor made by Iron Man himself. Although he can't use it now, it is also an excellent collection item for collection. Tut tut. As expected of Iron Man's handwriting, looking at the exquisite steel armor image that appeared in the computer, it fits Lin's aesthetic very well. Immediately, Lin nodded and asked Tony curiously. "As expected of your handwriting, Tony, perfect. By the way, Tony, when will this armor be finished?" Facing Lin's question, Tony glanced at the screen and said jokingly to Lin. "Don't worry, there is a new inspiration recently. At that time, it can also be used on your battle armor. In a month, you can give it a try." Getting an affirmative reply from Tony, Lin said with a smile. "Okay, Tony, we'll be flying faster than the other. You can't put a limit on my steel armor, let's compare whose flight skills are better." "Okay, no problem, let's try in a month." Hearing Lin's request, Tony smiled and agreed. Then the two chatted for a while, and then, Lin hinted at whether to hold a party in the evening. I saw Tony hesitated for a while, and finally declined. Tut tut. It seems that Tony is ready to take it easy. It's a pity that in the big forest, there is another friend who has the same hobby. But after thinking about it, no one robbed him of the Oni-san model, and Lin was a little excited. After chatting for a while, Tony suddenly asked Lin, his tone a little hesitant. "Lin, you know, that Homeland Strategy, that security bureau. It's the one with a particularly long name. How much do you know about them?" Hearing Tony's question, Lin suddenly realized that Nick Fury should talk to Tony. So he said softly with a smile. "The bureau with a long name, I know their chief, or he used to be a colleague of my father. It's just that because of one thing in the early years, the relationship between the two became a lot colder. There has been no contact for years. The last time I was attacked and accidentally exposed my transcendent ability, their director came over. Tony, listen to you, did he find you? Listening to Lin's question, Tony nodded and said jokingly. Yeah, the very night I announced I was Iron Man, their chief found me. To be honest, as you said before, that one-eyed dragon director really looks very distinctive. Speaking of which, Tony winked at Lin. Lin saw this and said with a smile. Yes, look at his head shape, pure braised egg head. Ha ha. With that said, Lin pulled out a picture of a braised egg from his phone and handed it to Tony. When Tony saw it, he laughed too. Don't say it, it really looks like this. Mr. Braised Egg. Ha ha ha. The two looked at each other and smiled for a while. Tony said sternly. By the way, their director named Nick Fury said that they were in charge of the Super Ability Agency. How do you feel? Hearing Tony's question, Lin replied casually. Not so good. If an ordinary person encounters them, there is no way. But, for rich people like us, they don't want to provoke too much. If we get entangled, we will cause them no less trouble. Hearing this, Tony nodded with a deep sympathy and said with a smile. I think so too, he even wants to invite me to join their bureau as an advisor. Don't they know, how much is my monthly salary? Can they afford me? Ha ha. At this point, Tony laughed, and Lin laughed too. Ha ha. Unbelievable. After laughing for a while, the two chatted about the steel armor and the cooperation between the two companies for a while. Finally, the two big bosses directly confirmed the strategic partnership between the two companies. With the arrival of Pepper, the two began to return to the living room on the first floor and began to eat lunch. That afternoon, New York, Lin's villa. Since discovering the traces of the keel, Lin has sent people around to see if there are any villas for sale. After finding a villa in Queens with a good surrounding environment, buy it directly. I plan to live in my own villa instead of a hotel in New York in the future. The future of New York is quite lively. If you don't prepare for the layout in advance, wouldn't it be a waste of time to live up to Leon's efforts? At this moment, Lin is in the basement of the villa, with Frank and several special team leaders standing next to him. Now, their eyes are all focused on a man sleeping on an iron bed in the middle of the basement. The man's right arm is made of metal. It was Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes. At this moment, Bucky had been used by Lin to make him fall into a deep sleep is 823. And what Lin has to do now is to awaken his true consciousness. In fact, Lin started to do the first two, but according to the feedback, as long as he has one more treatment today, he can be completely awake and eliminate those brainwashing procedures set by Hydra. Even if you encounter Hydra next time, you will not be controlled. Because Bucky was about to wake up, just in case, Frank sent someone to keep an eye on Bucky's every move to prevent accidents. Although Lin felt it didn't matter, he let Frank arrange it, after all, well-intentioned. Seeing Bucky falling asleep, Lin nodded slightly. To Bucky, he said in a relaxed tone. I think, Bucky Barnes' consciousness, the body should return to normal, no longer under the influence of brainwashing. The moment the voice fell, a light green energy began to wrap Bucky Barnes, and then a little bit of gray-black impurities spread out in the form of smoke. Seeing this, Lin frowned slightly and spit out two words lightly. Clean. In an instant, the gray-black impurity smoke disappeared. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. 10 minutes. As time goes by, it can be seen to the naked eye that the light green energy gradually weakens. Bucky Barnes's fingers begin to tremble slightly, and his eyelids also tend to open. Soon, 20 minutes passed, and everyone could see that Bucky Barnes's body was shaking more and more. Suddenly, Bucky opened his eyes and sat up, his eyes lost as if he had lost his memory. But then, his eyes began to focus, and he looked around and looked at the people not far away. Immediately stood up from the bed and made a fighting posture to the Lin crowd. Then, Da asked, where is this place? Who are you? Seeing this, Lin frowned slightly. It seemed that her memory had not fully recovered, so she said lightly. Memory restoration. Almost instantly, a strange wave enveloped Bucky Barnes, and everyone could clearly see the many expressions on Bucky Barnes' face and eyes. There are surprises, fears, worries, etc. It is extremely complicated. Bucky Barnes fell to his knees, his expression full of pain, as his memory fully recovered. But, having said this, Lin's tone was slightly hesitant, and then continued. Recently, we have a more important matter, you wait a moment. After the busy days are over, I will send some professionals to accompany you. Because, Steve is in a very special position right now. He is now, sleeping in. Having said that, Lin stared into Bucky's eyes and spat out 2 words. Antarctica. More. The next day, morning, at the Boric building. At this moment, Lin took Frank, Bucky and others to walk on the first floor of the building. While walking, he said to Bucky next to him. Bucky, I told you before that Steve is sleeping in Antarctica right now. Although I'm still alive now, I want to fully return to my peak state. There is one treasure that can definitely help. Having said that, Lin stomped on the ground under Bucky's suspicious gaze. This treasure, I call it the keel. The keel has a very strong healing ability, and even claims to be able to bring the dead back to life. So I believe it must be of great help to Steve's recovery. And it's buried in the ground I just stepped on. I have bought this building, and the property rights are mine. However, it's not just my family that is eyeing the keel, there is an evil force called the Hand Society, and O2 is also closely looking for it. Although I have found the location of the keel has been sealed. As for the seal, I can break it, but in the process of breaking the seal, there will definitely be a huge noise, and the energy fluctuations of the keel will also be distributed around. It will definitely attract the attention of the Hand. So, our enemy is mainly the Hands and the meeting. Speaking of this, Lin's tone has already revealed a ruthless tone. As long as we wipe out our Hands and will, the keel will belong to us completely. Bucky asked Lin in confusion when he heard this. Lin, can you tell me about this life meeting? It sounds familiar to me. Lin sneered at Bucky's question. Hands and clubs, a group of rubbish selling drugs. What's more abhorrent is that, in order to eliminate evidence, they generally blind and deaf people before letting them make drugs. Having said that, Lin took out his smartphone directly, then turned on the screen and instructed Vera. Vera, get the information about the Hand and the meeting and show it to Bucky. Okay, sir. Under Bucky's surprised eyes, a large amount of information appeared on the phone. Seeing this, Lin handed the phone to Bucky and said slowly. Let's take a look first. To be honest, if you couldn't find any trace of him, he would have been killed long ago. This time, grab something, grab it on my head, don't take the opportunity to wipe them out. Are you worthy of these innocent people? Bucky heard this, took the phone, and slowly flipped through the messages recorded on the phone. Bucky's face remained calm as he watched, but Lin could clearly see that there was something called anger in his eyes. Well, it appears that morale is available. This time, Lin was fully prepared for the attack on the Hands and the meeting, not only brought in most of his company's combat power, but also asked Bucky to help. In order to allow Bucky to give full play to his strength, he directly stated the role of the keel. I believe that Bucky's friendship with Steve will definitely give his life to defend the keel. Although Lin is disdainful of the strength of the Hands and will, but now the Marvel world has begun to have signs of chaos. Hydra has started working with Obadiah. Not sure, Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D., and even other mysterious forces are involved. The role of the keel is no trivial matter. This is a treasure that can bring people back to life, not to mention the source power behind him. Although it is of inferior quality, its value can be imagined with the cherishing degree of the power of the source. It can definitely make an ordinary person become a strong man. If there is a superhuman who feels valuable and comes directly, then Lin will be a muggle. So, in order to ensure that this operation is foolproof, Lin has a lot of thought. If it's just time to come back, then take the opportunity to wipe it out and not let the news of the keel be exposed. Once exposed, especially if the keel is exposed, there will definitely be a lot of troubles in the back. It didn't take long before Bucky looked up and said to Lin. What do I need to do? But, although my strength is beyond ordinary people, compared with your subordinates, I have no extraordinary ability. Are you sure I can help? At this point, Bucky's tone was obviously hesitant. Well, the strength is indeed relatively ordinary, only a wealth of combat experience and a metal arm. Oh, plus the physical fitness after strengthening. It's really not as good as the superhumans under his own family. However, as long as Lin is willing, with Bucky's rich combat experience, he will definitely be able to forge a strong player who is not weak, at least not worse than Frank. Lin glanced at Bucky's metallic right arm, said softly with a small smile on his face. Do you know? My subordinates were originally the same as you, not even comparable to you, but their physical quality was higher than that of ordinary people. But I have a way to give them extraordinary ability and enhance their combat power. So, I can also give you extraordinary ability. With your rich combat experience, I believe that your strength will not be too bad. This battle will definitely play a huge amount of role. Lin said here 823, looked at Bucky's surprised eyes, and said something lightly. Think about it, what if your metal right arm could become a normal human arm? Having said that, Bucky asked urgently. Lin, really? You can really make my right arm look normal? Hearing Bucky's urgent tone, Lin smiled softly. I can. And, it can be done now. Then, under Bucky's astonished gaze, Lin spit out a few words at Bucky. Grant extraordinary ability, Wanhua. As soon as the words fell, a light red mist energy enveloped Bucky. Immediately afterwards, in the red fog, muffled humming gradually sounded. Bucky is in the throes of a body modification right now. Frank and the other members of the special operations team next to him also had lingering fears when they saw it, full of admiration, staring at Bucky in the red mist. They have all gone through the same process. The pain in it is like an insect bite. It can be said that the pain penetrates into the bone marrow. And Bucky was just groaning, not howling in pain, and had to admire it. As time passed slowly, the red mist faded away, revealing Bucky's body. I saw, Bucky shouted softly. Wanhua. Wanhua. The moment Bucky's voice fell, Frank and the others looked at Bucky's metal right arm in surprise, and saw that the metal right arm gradually turned into flesh color. In less than 5 seconds, the metal right arm instantly transformed into a common flesh right arm. Then, I saw that the flesh and blood right arm gradually transformed into a long knife that flashed silver-white metal light. Immediately afterwards, the right arm was transformed into a spear, a hammer, a mace, and even a firearm. Watching Bucky keep transforming his hands, a faint smile appeared on his face. This is the ability he gave him, so he naturally knows what kind of effect it will have. Wanhua, as the name suggests, is capable of producing all kinds of changes. In the initial stage, it can control its arms and even legs to change into other substances and forms. Definitely, it can only be converted into common materials such as iron, copper, etc. at present. The transcendent matter involved cannot yet be transformed. However, as long as they are trained and promoted for a long time, they can be transformed into extraordinary substances. Even to the extreme, you can transform yourself into an extraordinary weapon. Regarding this, Lin made up a picture in his brain. He always thinks about Bucky and Steve, who are extremely close, in case Steve lacks weapons. Tut tut. The thought of Steve fighting with Bucky's supernatural weapon made Lin burst into laughter. But after all, it was professionally trained, and there was no expression on Lin's face. Just showing thumbs up for Bucky's quick mastery of ability. As Bucky continues to master Wanhua ability, the speed of change is getting slower and slower, but at the same time, the difficulty of changing objects is getting stronger and stronger. There have even been some more complicated weapons such as submachine guns, rifles, etc. After a while, Bucky looked up and thanked Lin. Thank you, Lin, this ability is really suitable for me. What do I need to do? You can tell me at any time, as long as I can do it, I will never shirk. Well, it seems that Bucky's favor has been collected, and maybe the United States Captain Steve's favor is about to be received. Tut tut. Seeing that I came to the Marvel world, I constantly have superhero owe my favor. Well, when you need their help to block mines in the future, you can just speak up. No, it should be easy to speak when it comes to the dangers of the world. Please call me, the Gift King Lin. Duncan. These thoughts flashed through Lin's mind, and immediately, Lin nodded slightly to Bucky, and said softly with a smile. Bucky, this fight will trouble you. Be sure to guard the location of the keel, and don't let other people in. Hearing what Lin said, Bucky nodded solemnly. Lin is very satisfied with this. At night, the Boric building. Lin, Frank, Bucky and other Special Forces team members all gathered in the lobby on the first floor of the building. Lin spoke aloud to everyone. Tonight, there will be a fierce battle. Everyone, you must be vigilant, especially those ninjas wearing black clothes. They are all hidden masters, and if they are not careful, they may be assassinated. So, this time it is life-threatening. I believe that you should have received the corresponding training and have no doubts about your courage. Here I promise that if you sacrifice your life here, your family members, the Shining Star Group, will take good care of them and will receive the best resources. Then, with a change of tone, he said softly with a smile. But, you don't need to worry too much, as long as you don't die on the spot, with my ability, I can definitely save you. Everyone smiled when they heard what Lin said. They have all experienced the healing ability of their own boss. Can be called, live dead man, raw bones. Even just one breath can save life. Why can they know? Just ask their captain, how did they get the position of commander of the Special Operations Team? They won the opportunity to acquire extraordinary ability after a fierce battle. Seeing the smiles on everyone's faces, Lin's face also showed a slight smile. This time he will be ready to do it, if nothing else. Hand and meeting, he is dead. Keel, he also got it. Immediately, he ordered everyone to arrange defensive measures. And he took Frank and Bucky to the outside of the Boric building. Looking at the crowd of 2s and 3s walking outside, Lin said softly. Expel the crowd. The moment the words fell, a strange wave radiated to the surroundings. In the eyes of Frank and Bucky, following Lin's order, all the pedestrians took the initiative to leave the surroundings of the Boric building, and they went further and further. Soon, Frank and Bucky suddenly felt that the surroundings were extremely silent except for the sound of cicadas, birds or cats. Then looked at Lin in shock. They know that Lin's ability is very strong, but it still feels incredible to affect the actions of so many people on such a large scale. Lin enjoyed the shocked stares from Frank and Bucky. But after a while, he stretched out his hand and motioned to return to the hall together. Now, what to do is break the Keel seal. Take Frank and Bucky back to the lobby on the first floor. Watching others find their defensive positions one after another, he nodded slightly in satisfaction. Then he walked to the center of the hall, facing the open space in front of him, and said aloud. Backquote, open a channel. Suddenly, the empty land in front of him began to shake slightly, and as time passed, the shaking became larger and larger. The members of the Special Forces team used their subconscious force to find the handle and stabilize their position. Then, he stared at the flat ground with extremely shocking eyes. At this moment, in their eyes, the flat ground revealed a huge amount of cave, the mouth of the cave, and a stair-like passage quietly formed. Lin saw this with a faint smile on her face. Then he waved his hand and walked into the passage. Frank and Bucky, as well as the 5 members of the special team, followed him without hesitation. Looking at the darkness in front of him, there is no bright passage. Lin frowned slightly, then whispered. Bright. The moment the words fell, the entire dark passage was instantly bright. As if there was an incandescent light shining above it. Afterwards, Lin continued to walk towards the front of the passage with everyone behind him. Lin continued to walk deep underground with the people behind him. Soon, we reached the end of the passage. At the end, there is a bronze-colored gate blocking it, and there are dragons carved on the gate. Lin frowned slightly at the handle of the bronze door, or the small, dragon head. Lin knew that this was the seal of the Keel. If you want to enter the bronze gate, the best way is to directly input the power of the dragon, or the power of the iron fist, directly into the dragon head. The door will open automatically. It's a pity that the trace of Iron Fist has not been found yet, so there is no such thing as the power of the dragon. But since he came here, Lin naturally has a solution. Turning his head and looking back at the crowd, he said loudly. Next, I'm going to break the seal. You step back a little bit, and be careful to accidentally hurt you for a while. Lin looked at the retreating crowd, nodded slightly, and then went to the small faucet. Say something softly. Break the seal. The moment the words fell, Lin could clearly feel a strange energy wave rushing towards the bronze door. The bronze gate remained silent, and even directly emptied energy absorption 827. Seeing this, Lin frowned slightly and sighed. Although this was expected, but after it appeared, it meant that only Storm. Afterwards, Lin retreated a few meters away, looked at the bronze gate a little far away, and spoke in a deep voice. Wind blade. In an instant, dozens of light cyan wind blades appeared quietly, and then rushed directly to the bronze gate. Dong dong dong. As a series of loud voices continued to emerge, Lin looked at the unscathed bronze door, and his face did not change. Then, he said aloud. I think, in the next 10 minutes, the effect of all actions will increase by 10 times. As the voice fell, Lin looked at the wealth value displayed by the system, which suddenly decreased by nearly 100 million. Then, say it out loud. Weaken the seal. In Lin's eyes, a pale gray light directly covered the bronze door, trying to weaken the seal of the door. Then, Lin said loudly again. Wind blade. Suddenly, a light cyan wind blade that was 10 times stronger than the energy fluctuations emitted just now appeared in the air, and also rushed directly to the bronze gate. Meanwhile, Lin shouted loudly. Flame. Wind. Wind helps fire. Lightning strike. Dimension slash. Year. In the eyes of Frank, Bucky and others, the bronze gate not far away was under a lot of attacks, exuding strong energy fluctuations. The flames emit scorching heat, the thunder and lightning make a frightening sound, and there are waves in the space. In Lin's mental perception, the bronze gate that originally exuded strong energy fluctuations gradually weakened. As a result, the number of self-initiated speeches to follow the law is increasing, and the wealth value consumed is also increasing. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes. As the predetermined boosting effect ended, Lin perceived the strength of the bronze gate seal, revealing an exciting color. Now the sealing strength of the bronze gate has been reduced by more than half. One more attack just now, it should be able to break the seal. So, like before, he said loudly. I think, in the next 10 minutes, the effect of all actions will increase by 10 times. As the voice fell, the wealth value displayed by the system suddenly decreased by about 100 million. Lin didn't change her face when she saw this. You can only get the keel, as long as you can get the power of the source. No amount of wealth can be sacrificed. Only the system upgrade is the most important thing at present. So began a new round of strong attacks. Seeing this, everyone in the back of Frank smashed their teeth involuntarily. ACFI. The state of their boss's frantic attack just now completely shocked them. Now there is a new round of strong attack, and subconsciously pushes back a few more steps, for fear of accidentally hurting himself. Minutes passed as time passed. There are still 2 minutes left before this increase. Suddenly. Boom. The bronze gate seal suddenly burst, and it exploded into pieces in an instant. At the same time, everyone perceives that there is a strong wave of energy spreading around from the bronze gate. As the energy sweeps around them, the body feels extremely comfortable, as if every cell in the body is soaking in a hot bath. At the moment, Lin was suddenly heard yelling. 100 times the ban. The moment the words fell, the extremely comfortable energy quickly disappeared without a trace. And Lin at the moment, sullen and dark. The seal on the bronze gate was successfully broken as expected. But at the same time as the seal was broken, the keel energy accumulated inside began to spread rapidly to the surrounding through the broken seal hole. Originally, Lin expected this kind of situation, and used his words to follow in advance to block the surrounding space and prohibit the spread of energy. Result. The energy properties of the keel are extremely special, coupled with too much energy. It only plays a little blocking role, and a lot of keel energy has been scattered around. Fortunately, he directly increased the ban power by 100 times, banning the spread of keel energy. But despite this, it is believed that the present hand will have already perceived the existence of keel energy. Even other people with extraordinary ability can also feel this powerful and beneficial energy. Mind so. Feng Shu immediately shouted to the Frank crowd behind him. Frank, Bucky, hurry up and inform the rest of the building to be alert. There's a good chance the enemy is coming. So are you. Be vigilant, the enemy this time may be beyond our imagination. The voice fell, and Lin walked directly into the bronze door. Just in case, the most important thing right now is. The method of upgrade 4 is based on the system. Frank and Bucky looked at each other behind him, and Frank quickly gave some orders to the special forces next to him. Watching the rapid rush to the outside of the passage. Then he and Bucky followed, entering the bronze door with Lin. At the moment when the energy of the keel exploded, a large number of black shadows wearing ninja costumes flashed in Hell's Kitchen, and they kept running in one direction. In Queens, several magicians in robes turned to look in the same direction. Not far from Hell's Kitchen, an eyeless middle-aged white man flashed in space, heading towards the Boric building. At the same time, a large number of Hydra agents wearing black battlesuits and holding an instrument rushed to the Boric building. Lin at this moment, after entering the Bronze Gate, feeling that there is plenty of energy in it, squinting and enjoying it. He only enjoyed it for a while, then strode forward and rushed inside. At this moment, Frank and Bucky also followed. The three of them moved forward quickly, only to see that the passage was getting wider and wider. I saw a magnificent hall appeared in front, and in the middle of the hall lay a huge dragon-shaped corpse. The keel exudes strong energy fluctuations. Seeing this, Lin directly climbed the steps of the main hall and rushed towards the keel in the main hall. Frank and Bucky looked at each other and followed closely behind. What makes the two feel strange is that the closer they get to the keel, the more oppressive they feel, and the more difficult it is to walk. This is the remaining dragon power. Even if it is a dead dragon, the dragon power contained in it is not something that ordinary people can withstand. However, Lin in front seemed to be unhindered, and strode forward directly to the front of the keel. Lin looked at the huge keel in front of him and felt the strong energy fluctuations it radiated. He stretched out his left hand to try to touch and tap, and there was a hint of inquiry in his eyes. Immediately, no detailed analysis was carried out. Instead, open the system directly and watch the notifications emerging from the system. Ding! 100 copies of inferior source power have been retrieved, which can be converted into 10 strands of source power. After thinking for a moment in his mind, he commanded the system. The system absorbs 30 copies of inferior source power, converts it into source power, consumes wealth value and source power, and upgrades the system according to his own words. Ding! The host's order is being executed. The power of the source has been successfully transformed. In order to consume array of the power of the source, 10 billion wealth value, the system is being upgraded. Attention! There are still 70 copies of inferior source power left. May I ask if it can be converted into 7 strands of source power? No, keep saving. Received, host. It is expected that the system upgrade will succeed in 30 seconds. Countdown, 30, 29, 28. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations to the host, the fourth order words and expressions have been successfully promoted with the system. The fourth order speech, the law follows the effect as follows. Effect 1. You can meditate in your heart and use the words to express the Dharma. Effect 2. Allows the use of words and spells on unknown targets. Effect 3. After a while, Lin, who felt a lot of fourth order words and information emerged in his brain, showed a shallow smile on his face. Immediately, he opened his eyes, and there was a flash of light in his eyes. Looking at the keel in front of him whose energy fluctuations have decreased, but still exudes powerful energy, Lin said lightly. Open up space. The voice fell, and Lin waved his hand. Suddenly, in Frank's and shocked eyes, the entire huge amounts of keel disappeared. And the strong coercion that originally radiated also suddenly disappeared without a trace. The difference between them almost made the two fall. At this moment, Lin looked at the keel placed deep in the space with satisfaction. This is a typical feature of the fourth order utterance, and it can stably use the space ability. Instead of being like the third order language, you can only use attack or defense. All in all, the utterance of the fourth order is much higher than that of the third order in all aspects. Moreover, there is an ability that makes Lin feel a surprise in his heart. That is, you can meditate from the heart and use the words to express the Dharma. You must know that the words and expressions of the third level and below must be read out in actual combat. No matter how small your voice is, you have to read it. The fourth order ones are different. Just recite a sentence in your heart, and when the thought flashes by, you can start the speech and follow the law. Although the power may be much weaker, it is very good to remove the big drawback that must be said, and the efficiency of activation has been improved a lot. Prevent some people from making plans for themselves based on this. In addition, the system also released the restrictions on the target. The original words follow the law, and the goal must be very clear, and no vague display is allowed. For example, like the original search for the relics left by his father. Originally, it required step-by-step screening, but now it can be achieved in one sentence. Although the scope of ambiguity is still limited, with the continuous upgrade of the language, it is believed that the scope will gradually be released. At that time, one can really decide a person's fate in one sentence. Even being on Earth can affect the fate of purple sweet potato Thanos. Then I briefly thought about the characteristics of the fourth order speech. After a while, he turned his head and walked towards Frank Bucky, took them out of the hall, and walked back into the passage. He didn't forget that the large amount of Keel energy just released, with the special attribute of Keel energy, will definitely attract less people. Only with the current Special Forces team members, although it can resist ninjas like Hands and Will. But it is impossible to resist those extraordinary powerhouses, and he still needs to fight, otherwise it is very likely to suffer heavy losses. This is a seedling that he has carefully cultivated. If you lose too much, it will be troublesome. Lin leads the charge, followed by Frank and Bucky. The three quickly arrived at the main hall on the first floor of the Boric building, glanced around, looked at the members of the Special Operations team in a defensive posture, and nodded slightly. Then, Lin turned to look at the huge cave passage behind him, frowned slightly, and spit out two words. Close. The moment the voice fell, a dark yellow energy covered the entire cave passage. Boom. Immediately after, the sound of huge amounts of rang from the depths of the cave, and soon under the gaze of Lin and others, the passages of the cave began to merge and return to their original appearance. Seeing this, Lin's mouth curved into a smile, keeping the cave, otherwise someone would run into it, and it would be another entanglement when entering the hall. It's better to clean up in advance and fight hard. Mind so. Lien looked at the dimly lit street in the distance and said softly. Probing information. The voice fell, and a strange wave centered on Lin quickly spread around. Soon, Lin's brain was flooded with information. Suddenly, Lin yelled. The enemy has come. Fight. Fighting. Lin's voice just fell, as if the button was turned on. A large number of people in black ninja suits rushed directly to all the Special Forces members. Fortunately, basically all the members of the Special Operations team were vigilant in advance, and with their rich combat experience, they fought with the ninjas of the hand and the meeting. Lin looked at a member of the Special Forces team, directly relying on his strong physical fitness. He took a ninja knife, and then grabbed the opponent's neck with one hand and pinched it off. Then throw the corpse aside and start the fight with the next ninja. Seeing this, Lin nodded slightly with satisfaction, and then said softly. I said, all our fighters bless half an hour of fast healing halo. The moment the words fell, all the members of the Special Forces team in the entire building felt that their injuries were recovering quickly. In an instant, 827 knew that this was another masterpiece of the old version, and immediately shouted excitedly, ignoring the injury, and launched a fierce battle with the ninja. Well, this is also the feature of the fourth order language, which can be grouped in a short period of time. The longer the time, the greater the consumption. He just blessed 100 members of the Special Operations team with a quick healing halo for half an hour, which has consumed nearly 3 million wealth points. As for the third order speech, it could only be blessed by a single individual before, and it could only be a one-off. It's still a fourth order utterance, and it is comfortable to use. Such thoughts flashed across Lin's mind, and then he glanced at the members of the Special Operations team who were fighting. Then he brought Frank, Bucky and some of the Special Forces team leaders, and looked into the distance with a very solemn expression. He had previously sensed that there were waves of energy that were not weak and were coming. Suddenly, an older old lady took the lead, with the four men next to her, and strode towards Lin. It is the 5 fingers of the hand and the meeting, Mrs. Gao, Alexandra, Botu, Sowanda and Murakami. I saw Mrs. Gao speaking loudly to Lin and others. Hand over the keel. Forgive you not to die. In response, Lin flashed a look of disdain, and without saying anything, he directly motioned to Flake next to him to do something. It's disgusting to talk to them half a word about these rubbish. Leave one alive and get their way of using the keel energy to bring the dead back to life. Seeing this, Frank exchanged glances with Bucky, and rushed forward with the 3 commanders of the Special Operations team behind him. Well, exactly 5 people, facing 5 fingers. In Lin's eyes, Baha turned his hands into a sharp blade and charged towards Bo-Tu. At the same time, his whole body began to transform into metallic light, and he seemed to be an Iron Man. Watching Bo-Tu lift the long knife in his hand and slash it like Bucky, only a crisp sound came out. Bucky was unscathed, while Bo-Tu shivered slightly when he held the knife. It seemed that although Chi was used, it did little harm to a superhuman like Bucky who was very hard. Immediately, he turned his attention to Blake. At the moment, Frank, holding a special submachine gun, activates the fire ability, and wraps the submachine gun. I saw flames entwined around the submachine gun, and then only the sound of bullets was heard. Bullets with flames kept rushing towards Mrs. Gao. Seeing this, Mrs. Gao dodged directly to the side. Immediately, Frank showed a grim smile, then took the submachine gun and shot directly in the direction that Mrs. Gao was dodging. Tisk tisk. The energy of this chi is really unusual. Although a person is old, it is rare that his hands and feet are so flexible. Then he turned his attention to the three commanders of the Special Operations Team and frowned slightly. At the moment they were three captains, two were tied and one fell to the disadvantage. It seems that although they have received combat training before and passed the extraordinary ability given by Lin, they are not very rich in combat experience. They are not like Frank and Bucky, who either stood at the pinnacle of human beings before, or they have special abilities, and they have extremely rich combat experience. For them, it takes a long time to train hard. However, this does not affect. Bahao has the upper hand and is about to successfully kill it. And Frank also began to use the fire ability, fighting with Madame Gao in close quarters, and also began to gain the upper hand. Soon, the two freed their hands, and the remaining three were not surprising. Lin doesn't really care about the 5 fingers of the hand. With Frank and the others, they can successfully strangle him without him doing anything at all. And the reason why he looked so solemnly in this way was entirely because a real supernatural powerhouse was coming in the distance. More importantly, this extraordinary powerhouse exudes a dark aura, and his attack intentions are very obvious. Immediately after them, there are 3 auras of energy that exude not weak energy, as if following or chasing the person in front. In the other direction, there was a flash of breath, as if traveling through space, which made Lin very concerned. As for the breath of a large number of agents that followed, Lin ignored it. So, Lin watched the fight between Frank and the others, and then turned his gaze to the darkness beyond the main entrance. It seems that an enemy may appear to kill at any time. While Frank and the others were fighting, Kamar Taj magician Caecilius, who was wearing a monk's robe, was leading 2 companions, madly chasing the enemy in front of him. This person is Dormammu believer Hodgson Chester. Hodgson, who exudes a strong dark atmosphere, is desperately rushing towards the Boric building. In his perception, the strange energy just now can not only heal his current injury. More can be 5.8 dedicated to his master Dormammu. In exchange for powerful strength, and even killing the pursuers behind. Now, the turning point of the battle lies in whether he can arrive ahead of schedule and sacrifice it. As Hodgson thought, his eyes showed a ruthless color, and he directly sacrificed half of the remaining dark energy in his body. Speed up and rush towards the center of energy distribution. Caecilius looked at the figure that was gradually receding in front of him, a hint of helplessness flashed in his eyes, and then he quickly picked up speed. But the distance is getting farther and farther. At this moment, Lin looked into the distance with extremely strong eyesight, and found that in the sky, there was a man wearing a black robe, his eyes were like smoke, and his face was covered with strange runes. Flying towards himself like crazy. At this moment, Lin frowned slightly when he saw Hodgson, a Dormammu believer who flew in like a madman. Looking at the approaching distance, Lin said softly. Flights are prohibited here. Then, looking at Hodgson, who was full of dark auras in front of him, he stopped abruptly, and began to fall quickly as if he had encountered an obstacle. In this regard, a slight smile appeared on his face. Immediately afterwards, Lin saw a black fog shrouded around the opponent, reducing the tendency to fall. Then Hodgson looked at Lin who was not far away, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes, as if he knew who made the attack just now. Then strode forward, the dark energy in his hand began to condense into a long whip, dragging the whip, facing Lin. As if trying to whip Lin to death. Lin looked at Hodgson, who was moving forward. A trace of disdain flashed in his eyes, and said lightly. 10 times increase. Wind blade. Suddenly, several light blue wind blades emitting strong energy fluctuations appeared in front of Lin. Seeing this, Lin's thoughts turned, and several wind blades rushed directly to the enemy in front. Hodgson saw the blowing wind blade, his pupils shrank, he stopped, and the long whip suddenly dissipated, turning into a defensive shield. Bang! 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 Several wind blades collided with the dark black shield, making a loud noise. However, after the wind blade dissipated, the dark black shield still existed, but in Lin's perception, the energy contained in it had been weakened by more than half. At the moment, Hodgson began to stop, as if he knew how tough the enemy was in front of him. Immediately afterwards, Hodgson kept waving his hands along a wonderful trajectory, as if to outline a complex rune. In less than a second, Lin noticed that several black cones appeared in front of Hodges, and shot at him quickly. Feeling the powerful dark aura contained in it, Lin's face turned straight and she said in a deep voice. Defense. Then, as if thinking of something, he said one after another. Ice shield. Earth wall. Flame barrier. Space barrier. The moment the words fell, between Lin and Hodgson, multiple colors of light continued to emerge. The red-hot flame barrier, the dark yellow thick earth wall, and the silver-white ice shield exuding a strong cold air. The whole scene is very strange, as if there are many walls between the two. But then, bang, 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 the vertebral body exuding a strong dark aura directly penetrated the defensive barriers such as earth walls, flames, ice shields, etc., and made a violent sound at the same time. Seeing this, Lin was expressionless. Because in his perception, the energy of the black cone has begun to drop sharply. Until a space barrier not far away completely blocked it. Seeing this, Lin continued to speak softly. 10 times increase. Wind blade. Lightning strike. Dimensional slash. As the words in Lin's mouth continued to spit out, the energy fluctuations in front of him became larger and larger. Hodgson seemed to have a general perception, his complexion changed drastically, he directly pressed his hands on the ground, and half knelt on the ground. Then, in Lin's eyes, a large number of runes appeared on the ground, exuding a dark atmosphere, as if communicating something. Immediately afterwards, Hodgson was heard shouting roar loudly. My Lord Dormammu, please save your humble believers and bless you with the power of darkness. Immediately afterwards, the runes began to flicker a lot, as if they were eliciting some kind of power. At the same time, a large number of attacks generated by Lin's utterances have already reached the rune. For a while, the rune exudes a lot of black aura, forming a thick dark barrier that resists colorful attacks that emit huge energy fluctuations. Bang! 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 One after another attack, constantly rushing towards the dark barrier. Between the two fierce collisions, there was a violent sound. As a large number of attacks continue to emerge, the dark barrier is like a rootless tree, a source of water, gradually weakening. At the moment, Frank, who had finished solving the hand and meeting 5 fingers, took down Mrs. Gao, Bo2 and others, began to rush towards Lin. Looking at a strange thick black fog that appeared in front of him, and the scene of receiving a large number of colorful energies constantly attacking, was extremely shocking. In their perception, any blow in it is enough to kill them. And this kind of attack, as the boss keeps talking, keeps emerging. Suddenly I feel that my boss is really powerful. At the same time, Kamar Taj magician Cassialis, who was standing not far away, with his 2 companions, was also extremely shocked, watching the scene in front of him. In their perception, Hodgson, a normal Dormammu believer, is not very troublesome although his strength is good. But once communicated and sacrificed to Dormammu, it would become extremely powerful and extremely dangerous in a short period of time. And now Hodgson is in such a state. But in such a state, Hodgson is still at a disadvantage. Now they can clearly see that the dark barrier composed of a large amount of dark energy has been greatly weakened, and they can vaguely see the figure of Hodgson inside. Dormammu believer Hodgson also seemed to feel something at the moment and shouted in great fear. My lord, save me. Don't. .830. Abandon me. My lord. Before he could finish shouting, everyone saw that the black fog began to boil and began to revolve around Hodgson. Hearing it with his own ears and seeing it with his naked eyes, Hodgson began to howl loudly. Soon, in the eyes of everyone, Hodgson's body shattered and turned into black fly ash, spreading around. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the space, and under Lin's gaze, a dark gray force rushed towards him. When Lin saw this, her pupils shrank, she took a few steps back suddenly, and then shouted loudly. Defense. Resist. So far away. Lightning strike. Space cut. But this dark power seems to be very tenacious, the defensive means pass through directly, and the attack is also difficult to kill. With the space roll so far away, although the distance between the two is constantly delayed, Lin has the opportunity to attack a lot. But still not completely wiped out. Finally, there was still a ray of dark power entering Lin's body. Although Lin didn't feel any discomfort, it still made him look calm. Immediately, he turned his attention to Kamar Taj magician who was not far away. When that ray of dark power entered his body, Lin's face sank, and he quickly used his words. Explore yourself. As the words fell, Lin felt a strange wave of constant scanning back and forth from head to toe. Every place in his body, every cell, including his soul, had undergone at least 5 scans. Soon, information emerges in the brain. Immediately understand what the role of that ray of dark power is. This is the mark that comes from the dimension Mephisto Dormammu himself casts. It can not only locate, but also if he is emotionally unstable, he will also take advantage of it to connect with negative emotions and transform his soul. When Lin found out, he immediately said to himself, erase the mark. Remove the dark power. But it is a pity, because the essence of this force is extremely high, and it cannot be completely erased in the end just by the current words and expressions. Therefore, Lin can only say helplessly, seal the power of darkness. Blurred positioning. In an instant, Lin clearly felt that the dark power was enveloped by a dark purple power, and the fluctuations it radiated were completely concealed. But despite this, Dormammu doesn't appear on Earth, but once he does, he will definitely target himself. So Lin has a black face, and his solutions are only 2. One plan is to immediately look for a new source of power, and to advance to rank 5, or even rank 6, can erase this power. Another option is to go to Kamar Taj in person and find the most powerful man on Earth, the Ancient One Magician. Ancient One Magician basically opposes Latitude Mephisto every day, and there is absolutely a way to eradicate this force. Lin's attitude towards the Ancient One Magician was ambiguous and completely incomprehensible. One thing, however, is worthy of certainty. Now, the Ancient One Magician has no ill will towards himself. Whatever the reason, is it that you can make the future better, or that your future self is blessing your past self? Even, it is said that the Ancient One Magician has no way to see the future clearly now. In short, at the moment of her crossing, she didn't make a move, so she admitted her existence from the side. In this regard, Lin is still confident. Especially when he just crossed the Marvel world, he had been entangled in this issue, and then he figured it out. Existence is reasonable. But, he wasn't stupid enough to go straight to the Ancient One Magician and tell his identity. It is necessary to ingeniously test the meaning of Ancient One Magician through indirect methods. Therefore, he set his sights on the magician of Kamar Taj. Seeing Caecilius and the 2 magicians of Kamar Taj not far away, his composure began to slow down. Directly walking towards the opposite side, Frank and the others followed. As for the 3 of Caecilius, they saw Lin and others who were getting closer and closer. The look began to be vigilant, and they had not forgotten the scene of Lin's bombardment just now. Lin looked at Caecilius and the others who looked increasingly alert, stood about 2 meters away, stopped, made a bow, raised his voice, and said. The magician from Kamar Taj, the followers of the evil god have just been wiped out by us. Please be a witness. Saying that, Lin stretched out his hand and took out a cut keel and a business card from the space. A word to heart. Immediately, with a thought, he controlled the keel in his hand to move in front of Caecilius, and said at the same time. It's my personal little care. Please say hello to the Ancient One Magician for me. Caecilius relaxed a lot when he heard Lin say the name of the Ancient One Magician. The current Ancient One Magician can be said to be the pinnacle of power in the entire Earth, and even in the entire universe. It can also be said to be an existence that can be counted. Since the other party knew the existence of Ancient One Magician and Kamar Taj, naturally they would not act irrationally. I am afraid that there will be a scumbag who doesn't know anything and regards himself as an enemy, and he will suffer. That's why Lin said the names of Kamar Taj and the Ancient One Magician in advance, in order to gain trust as quickly as possible. He deliberately proposed the name of Ancient One Magician, and at the same time gave the keel as a gift, the other party could not refuse. After all, the Ancient One Magician hasn't rejected it yet. You are a magician apprentice, what does it mean to reject it? Afterwards, if the Ancient One Magician accepts it, he will send someone to thank him, or even give a gift or invitation in return. Then it is to accept Lin, and even implicitly solve his troubles for him, which is naturally the best. If you just accept it without doing anything, it means ignoring it. The latter problem can only be solved by himself, but he can also let go. If the gift is not accepted, it will be returned directly. Tut tut. Lin should be vigilant, although it is not absolutely hostile, but there is definitely a problem. Otherwise, it will not do so. As soon as his mind changed, Lin saw Caecilius put away the keel and business card, and said loudly. Finished product, okay, unknown powerhouse, I will bring your heart to the Ancient One Magician. Now, we won't bother you anymore, and I have to report the task situation to the Ancient One Magician in time. Saying that, Caecilius made an apologetic expression towards Lin. Then control the sling ring, and quickly outline the transmission channel with sparks. The three of them saw the place where the past Qian Hao was sent, and immediately walked in. And Lin looked at the scene of the teleportation channel closing in a circle with sparks, and the corner of his mouth was slightly raised. Later, we will see the specific results. Immediately, looking at the surprised eyes of Frank and Bucky next to him, he clapped his hands to attract their attention, and said aloud. Now, the main enemy has been settled. You deal with the remaining traces. Saying that, he nodded to Frank. Frank, take care of the 5 fingers of your hands and meeting, I will be useful later. Watching Frank nod, Lin nodded slightly, and then said to everyone. I still have a little thing, you first count the number of injuries. Then, looking at a figure in the east, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he said softly. Forbidden space. At the moment, the inhuman Gordon is shocked by the scene of the bombardment and the burst of energy just now. Although he lost his eyes because of the alien awakening ability, he was called an eyeless person by the tribe. But with years of experience and his own spatial ability, he was able to accurately perceive what had just happened. Originally, the reason why he came to this position stemmed from the attraction of an energy. Not long ago, he suddenly felt a surge of energy that directly stimulated his body instinct. It can be called extremely craving, and even his brain has been affected. He can clearly perceive that he can also get this power, and can definitely greatly improve his ability. At that time, you can better find and protect your own clansmen. Not long after the battle was over, he sensed that the powerhouse who had been bombarded just now was walking towards him, and his face was startled. Now he can be regarded as peeping at the treasure of the strong man. If he is caught, it will definitely delay the important affairs of the clan. Thinking of this, I immediately cast ability. I want to get out of danger quickly. As for that energy, I will talk about it later. His face suddenly became very ugly, and he found that his space ability seemed to be completely invalid. And the strong man seems to know that all this is coming step by step. He was about to try to escape in the other direction. 830. He sensed it again, and a bunch of people arrived behind him. It is the mysterious agent force that has been chasing him or the Inhumans. The stench of their whole body, Gordon has always remembered. Every time he stayed in such a place for a long time, they would come. This time is probably no exception. The current situation is really. There is a wolf in front. A tiger in the back. Coupled with the fact that his ability was banned, Gordon suddenly felt a little desperate. Thoughts of suicide flashed through his mind. Because he knew the specific location of the clan, if he was caught and leaked his location, the entire Inhuman race would suffer huge amounts of blows. This makes him, who has been dedicated to protecting the aliens, simply unacceptable. But, he suddenly felt that the strong man in front rose up into the sky, passed over him, and flew behind him. Immediately feel overjoyed. At the moment, Lin is walking step by step, preparing to put some psychological pressure on Gordon to prepare the ground for the persuasion behind ACFI. Suddenly I saw the Hydra agent not far away. Killing intent flashed in my eyes. He didn't forget who was the one who attacked before. Suddenly said softly. Remove flight restrictions. Immediately, the strange fluctuations originally scattered around quickly dissipated. Immediately after, Lin uttered two more words. Flight. With a thought, Lin immediately rose into the sky and flew to the Hydra agent in the distance. As for Gordon, the person who solved Hydra said that after ability was banned, he couldn't go anywhere. And at the moment, the Hydra agent saw Lin flying towards him. A look of shock flashed across his face, and then the leader quickly shouted loudly. Shot. Immediately, the man subconsciously raised his pistol and shot Lin frantically. Bang bang bang. One after another gunshots kept ringing, and a particle bomb kept rushing towards Lin's position. But Lin's thoughts turned, and the word defense flashed past. Immediately, a pale yellow defensive barrier appeared in front of him. Feeling the constant bullets hitting the defensive barrier, a disdainful smile formed on the corner of Lin's mouth. The fourth order words follow the law, so even if the thoughts in the heart are turned, it is definitely not something that can be broken by some bullets. Sure enough, the blocked bullets fell to the ground one after another, making a crisp sound. Immediately, Lin spit out two words faintly. Wind blade. The instant the words fell, dozens of light blue wind blades appeared in front of him, his thoughts turned, and he quickly flew to the underground Hydra agent. The wind blade is his most commonly used and his favorite. Fast efficiency and strong lethality. And it's not like the flame, which directly burns the corpse into coke. It can be called clean. Several wind blades went down, and dozens of Hydra agents suddenly separated their heads and fell to the ground, blood flowing. Looking at all the dead Hydra agents, Lin nodded slightly. But smelling a lot of blood, he frowned slightly, and the word, clean, flashed in his heart. In an instant, all the blood on the ground disappeared without a trace. After everything is done, Lin turned his head and flew in front of Gordon, looking at the eyeless middle-aged man in a brown coat in front of him, smashing his teeth involuntarily. Although I have seen it through the internet in my previous life, it is really amazing to see such a strange, even terrifying face in reality. Gordon in front of him seemed to feel something and said in a deep voice to Lin in front of him. This strong man, I do not have any hostility. Can you let me go? Well, the reason why he dared to say such a thing is that he has no obvious malice or killing intent on the other side. Naturally, if I can leave earlier, I will leave earlier. He didn't forget the scene of the bombardment just now. The strength of this strong man is really appalling. He immediately heard a slightly smiling voice coming from the opposite side. This inhuman friend, don't worry. There is a word, I would like you to bring the leader of your inhuman race, Ms. Jiang. Hearing this, Gordon's expression was startled, and he immediately understood that this strong man knew the Inhumans very well. But he nodded helplessly and said in a deep voice. Okay, no problem, I have something to say to Jiang. I will lead the way. Hearing this, Lin said softly with a smile. Please tell Jiang that I know the whereabouts of his daughter Daisy. Her daughter, desperate to find his mother. Hearing this, Gordon was shocked, and a hint of surprise flashed on his face. He knew that Jiang had a daughter who had been missing for many years, but he didn't expect to find it here, so he said it immediately. Okay, no problem. Hearing this, Lin nodded with satisfaction, and then said a little unhurriedly. This friend of the Inhumans, please reply immediately if you have any news. Immediately afterwards, Lin took out the mantra card that he had obtained in the previous lottery and used it against Gordon. Seeing Gordon shrouded in a strange wave all over, Lin asked casually. By the way, where will your Inhumans be in the next life? If you don't reply, I'll take Daisy to find you. The role of the mantra card, Lin has tried it, the effect is quite good. At that time, with the help of the mantra card, it can be said that Tobian, who scrambled for the company's equity, was directly hit the bottom. Now he doesn't know where to beg. Therefore, every time Lin draws a lottery, she will feel very happy when she draws a mantra card. The effect of the mantra card provided by the system is quite good, the effect is more secret, and it is not easy to be detected. This time, Lin was quite curious about the afterlife of the Inhumans. In the previous life, I only saw a general introduction, and there was no specific information at all. This time, I finally caught a core member of the inhuman race, and I had to set up information. He was quite curious about the inhuman Lady Reina who would prophesy in the future. This is the second person he knows who can see the future besides Ancient One Magician, Sorcerer Supreme. As long as you enter the afterlife, obtain the Mist of Terrigen, and find Quill's female Reina, you can give birth to an existence that can predict the future. This will greatly boost Lin's future development. In particular, the Marvel world, which has already begun to show signs of chaos, is likely to play a key role. Don't you see? I don't know when a Dormammu believer popped up, followed by Kamar Taj's magician, and the leader turned out to be the future villain Caecilius. Tut tut. Because of his own existence, the Marvel world has ushered in a new change. And whether he is good or bad in this new world depends on his development of his own ability and his mastery of the future. Therefore, it is necessary for him to foresee the ability of the future. If it weren't for the fact that the current way of speaking could not solidify this kind of ability, he would have blessed himself. Relevant thoughts flashed through Lin's mind, and then he stared at Gordon, who was being cast with the mantra card, to see the place name he reported next. Hearing Lin's question, Gordon was stunned for a moment, then subconsciously said directly. The afterlife is on Rodakina, a branch of the Himalayas, and you can come to us with Daisy. After speaking, Gordon suddenly turned pale, as if he knew that he had done something wrong. After thinking about it, a bitter smile appeared on his face, knowing that he had been trapped. Only he and some elders knew where he lived in the next life, and he led the others to leave. It could be called top secret. How could he say it subconsciously? It was definitely the other party who exerted influence on him. Now, it's really over. Lin looked at Gordon, whose face was obviously pale, and then looked at the mantra card that had completely dissipated, with a shallow smile on his face, and then said lightly. Okay, if you don't have time to reply, I'll visit in person. At the moment, Gordon's anger rose in his heart, but when he turned to think of the opponent's powerful strength, he suddenly felt frostbiting, like a on his back, and the flame of anger was directly destroyed by the coldness in his heart. Immediately, he said with a wry smile. Okay, I understand, I will tell Jiang everything. Lin saw the wry smile on Gordon's face, and said something comforting, as if to imply something. Don't worry, I still have a good impression of the Inhumans. Gordon listened, nodded somewhat irrefutably, and then said helplessly. Now, can I leave? Seeing this, Lin recited a sentence in his heart, lift the space ban. Feeling the surrounding power dissipate about the forbidden space, Lin said with a smile. Definitely, remember to bring my words with you. Also hand a business card. After Gordon heard it, he took the business card and immediately tried his ability. Result. Disappears instantly. He had instantly moved to the afterlife where the Inhumans lived, and felt the sunlight approaching noon in the afterlife. Gordon's expression was solemn, and he moved directly in front of Jiang in a space. Facing Jiang in front of her, she said nervously. Jiang, something is wrong. Someone knows the location of the afterlife. Also, the other party also knows the whereabouts of your daughter Daisy. Jiang, whose face was flat, looked at Gordon, who was a little flustered in front of her, and said comfortably in a very soft tone. Gordon, don't worry, you will tell me everything slowly. Gordon seemed to have gotten used to the calm Jiang. Hearing the familiar and soft tone, he slowly calmed down and handed Jiang Lin's business card. Before, I felt an extremely greedy energy in my body. Follow the traces and follow. But this time, I met a powerful human. 8. Afterwards, the two continued to talk. Jiang, who was originally flat, began to look surprised, and began to think a lot in her heart. Lin looked at Gordon's leaving figure, gave a slight perception of the mark he left on him, and showed a satisfied smile. He is not stupid. Although he has a stronghold in the world, he can't keep the other party and move directly. By then, Lin will be a muggle. And at the moment has left a mark on Gordon. As long as the other party doesn't find it, Lin can locate at any time, and even enter the afterlife at any time. Well, the main reason for using mantra cards in the past was to put a little pressure on the other party. If you don't give him a little pressure, how can you cooperate well and provide yourself with the Mist of Terrigen? I believe that Gordon and Jiang should be very nervous now. After thinking about it, Lin walked directly into the Boric building. Watching Frank Bucky et al. Are assembling teams, stats. Squinting, he looked at it seriously for a while, and then, the number class who had finished counting the data walked up to Lin and said in a deep voice. Boss, this time we dispatched a total of 102 combatants, 5 were killed and 80 were injured. When he heard Frank reveal a large number of injured people, Lin raised his head and watched carefully, the members of the Special Forces team standing not far from him. They saw obvious bloodstains on their faces or hands, or on their legs, or bloodstains. Nodding with satisfaction, then said softly to the Special Forces member who was standing not far away. Quick cure. The moment the words fell, everyone could see it with the naked eye, and a green light enveloped them. Immediately, the wound that was still oozing blood healed immediately, and at the same time, he seemed to be lying in the hot spring, quite enjoying himself. Soon, the flesh and blood that had been festering began to recover as before, even slightly delicate. Seeing this, Lin nodded slightly in satisfaction, and then said to Frank next to him. The deceased must be well compensated, and everything that was promised before must be fulfilled. Hearing what Lin Ren said, Frank nodded heavily, saying that it must be done. From the beginning, he said one thing to the army, and his behavior was very unpleasant, and what Lin said was what he thought. The deceased were all the students he personally trained. In any case, they all had the friendship between teachers and students, and he had the responsibility to take good care of their families. Afterwards, we briefly talked about the Special Forces team. Then, his tone changed, and he said to Frank with some grimness. Frank, what happened to the 5 fingers of the hand? Gee. There is a keel in New York, and the root of the exposure also lies in the 5 fingers of the hand and the meeting. If it wasn't for the fact that they were looking around like crazy in order to get the keel, they would all go to the Shining Star Group's office in New York. Otherwise, Lin would not have thought of the existence of the keel so quickly. However, with the keel in hand, it is natural to fully tap its role. And he is currently for Lin, the power of the source has been used. The rest, the most valuable is to bring the dead back to life, or resurrection. At this point, you need to communicate with the hands and the 5 fingers to obtain. This is a top secret technology that they have developed by themselves. Immediately, Lin walked in front of Mrs. Gao and the others who were tied up. Looking at them, they were all in a mess, covered in blood, and there were obvious burns, freezing marks, etc. on their bodies, and even the legs and feet of 830 appeared strangely twisted. Satisfied, he nodded slightly. These garbage, if you don't kill them directly, they are cheap. Then, looking at the angry eyes of Madame Gao, Botu and others, they wiped their hands and said calmly. Now you are still alive because we want you to use keel resurrection technology. Who can tell me? Who lives? Everyone else, die. Hearing Lin's request, the 5 fingers of the hand and the meeting closed their eyes one after another. As if to say, tell you, it is really dead. If I don't tell you, I will have hope of living. In this regard, Lin said that he was very helpless. Originally, he wanted to achieve his goals without using words. Now it seems that it is more convenient to use the verbal method. Immediately, he said loudly to the disciple. I think, you will answer the questions I ask truthfully. In an instant, a strange wave enveloped the disciple. Seeing this, Lin's mouth curved into a smile, and then Mrs. Gao and the others watched. Ask the blogger again. Tell me about your technique of using keel resurrection. When Botu heard Lin's question, a struggle flashed on his face, as if resisting something. Then, after a while, his face was expressionless, and his voice made a mechanical statement. Using the keel resurrection technique. You need to build an altar and consume keel energy. Utilize, resonate. Lin frowned slightly as he listened to the answer from the disciple, but it was still not as easy to use as the mantra card. The answer is intermittent, and even now the other party is still struggling, and some places are unclear. But it doesn't matter. Afterwards, under the fearful gazes of Mrs. Gao, Murakami and others, Lin used her words to follow the law. Force them to speak technology. 5 Personal information cross-comparison. Basically the entire resurrection technology is perfectly presented in front of Lin. Looking at the technology provided by the Hand Association, Lin frowned. The key to this technology is to use a ray of high-quality energy as an introduction to revive others. The main communication of the Hand Association is the power of the black sky. And Lin is crazy, and will be contaminated with the power of the black sky. It's enough trouble for him to have a Dormammu staring at him now, and he doesn't want to be stared at by another dimension Mephisto. But after thinking about it, I found that I really have one, or even multiple, high-quality powers, even higher than Heikong's power. That is, the power of the source. This is obtained by the system purifying multiple Keel powers. The power of the source can be used for system advancement, the quality of which is absolutely nothing to say. In this way, the most important piece of the puzzle of resurrection technology has been completed. In the back, you can let yourself swing your top combat power and let go of your hands and feet. Anyway, if you die, you can be resurrected, so don't have too many scruples in your heart. Definitely, immortality is the best. If the power of the source is used too much, Lin will also feel very distressed. Afterwards, he looked at the hands like a dead dog and would know 5 fingers. Lin made a throat-slashing gesture to Frank next to him, and Frank immediately understood. He directly picked up the pistol on his waist and fired 5 shots in a row at the heads of the 5 people. Bang! 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 As 5 gunshots rang out, 5 people were killed. Seeing this, a faint smile appeared on Lin's face, then turned away. This battle tonight was really comfortable. System upgrade successfully. All the intruding enemies were killed. Get a lot of Keel energy. Get the power of the source. Get resurrection technology. In this way, the harvest of one night is really a lot of 0. Lin looks back on her harvest with some joy. Finally, take a look at the dilapidated Boric building. With Frank, Bucky and the members of the Special Forces team, they rushed to the villa by car. At this moment, the Boric building, after losing its Keel, is worthless, and it is not worth Lin's trouble. Not long after, a shadow flashed across the lobby on the first floor of the uninhabited Boric building, as if it had taken something away. 2 days later, in Los Angeles, the office of the chairman of Shining Star Group. Lin is a bit idle and bored, playing with his phone. Because the company's system has gradually improved, and he has to personally screen a large number of loyal and ability subordinates. Basically, when things get to his level, there are not many more. Most of them are about future strategic choices for enterprise development, but for Lin, who has past life memories, he can make the most correct judgments without thinking at all. Well, having memories similar to the future is so arrogant. In addition, he had just experienced a big battle 2 days ago, and now he doesn't want to move anymore and wants to rest. Well, I just want to rot for a while. So, start playing with your phone happily. Suddenly, Lin stood up, put away her phone, and fixed her eyes on a spot in room 5.8 of the office. He had just perceived that there was an obvious energy wave at that location, and it was even getting stronger. Immediately after, in Lin's eyes, one after another sparks began to appear continuously, gradually appearing in the shape of a circle. Seeing this, Lin immediately relaxed his vigilance. With such an obvious feature, he immediately knew that the visitor was Kamar Taj's magician. It seems that his gift Ancient One magician has been accepted, otherwise no one will come. That is, it is not known who will invite himself into Kamar Taj. Could it be the chubby king magician, or Mordu magician? Lin thought to himself that soon, the teleportation channel was officially opened. And the people who appeared inside were Caecilius. When Lin sees Kamar Taj's magician casting a space spell and passing by, a surprise flashed inside. Looking at this posture, Ancient One magician should not have any hostility towards himself, and may even invite himself. Otherwise, it is impossible to specially send someone over, and directly return a spell to the Keel, saving the embarrassment of the people. When he saw that the magician who came was Caecilius, he was slightly shocked. What does this mean? Did the Ancient One magician send the future villain to find him, to kill him with Caecilius? Lin turned his head and shook his head slightly. He didn't look like a fool, he certainly wouldn't do such an idiot. Immediately, I stopped thinking about it. After meeting, I would know after a chat, what brain cells were wasted. The more I thought about it, the more outrageous it became. So, he strode forward, facing Caecilius in front of him, and said aloud. This magician, we meet again. How do you call roar? Also, Have I received my kindness Guo2 magician? Hearing Lin's question, Caecilius had a solemn expression on his face. He did not forget the previous scene where Lin cast a spell, bombarded wildly, and shattered Dormammu's power abruptly. So he said in a low voice. Mr. Lin, you can call me Caecilius. Your kindness, Sorcerer Supreme, has been accepted, very satisfied. Sorcerer Supreme also said that she already knew your intentions. If you want a solution, welcome to Kamar Taj. Hearing this, a look of surprise appeared on Lin's face. It seemed that the May 1st magician recognized him quite a bit, so he quickly replied. Really? That's a big thank you to Sorcerer Supreme. Lo. Well, other people call it Roar Sorcerer Supreme, and we have to call Roar a little more respectful. So, wait a moment, I briefly order a company's business, and now I can leave for Kamar Taj to meet the Sorcerer Supreme. Then, after receiving an affirmative reply from Caecilius, he immediately walked to the desk, picked up the phone, dialed a number, and commanded in a deep voice. Catherine, I may have to leave the company for a few days recently. Everything is in accordance with the system. If there is something important, I will discuss it when I come back. After a few words, Lin nodded to Caecilius. Then watch Caecilius use the sling ring to open the sparkling circular space teleportation channel. Follow Caecilius across and enter Kamar Taj. After entering Kamar Taj, looking at the sun and sunlight above, it is already afternoon on this side. Then he looked around for a week, looking at the large number of magicians who were constantly training, and a thought flashed in his eyes. The memory of the previous life is indeed limited. Although many people complained about the previous life, Kamar Taj's magician is not only small in number, but also like a cannon fodder, and his strength is really straddling. But when I actually walked into Kamar Taj, I found that the number of magicians in it can't be said to be small, and basically all the magicians being trained exude energy fluctuations that are not weak. The magician who led the training gave him a faint sense of danger. One can imagine the strength of Kamar Taj. It seems that the latter rebellion did cause a lot of problems for Kamar Taj. It is not even possible to say that the Ancient One magician is secretly pushing, wanting to untangle and achieve true retirement. Tisk tisk. Thinking of such a dark thought, a faint smile appeared on Lin's face. Suddenly, I heard a voice in my ear. Lin, look to the light for a long time. In an instant, Lin's heart froze, all those thoughts just disappeared at once, with a stern expression, no longer looking around, and directly followed Caecilius forward. Lying down. The idea just now was actually detected by the Ancient One magician. They are all big guys like Sorcerer Supreme, how can they still like to hear people's voices so much? Lin complained silently in the dark in the bottom of her heart, and immediately, she didn't dare to think about it anymore. There is still something to ask the Ancient One magician later, and if he offends him again, his attitude will be even more embarrassing when he asks for something. Soon, Lin followed Caecilius into a tea room. Looking at the very familiar bald woman in monk robes sitting on the mat in front of the tea table, a solemn look flashed across her face. Afterwards, Caecilius stretched out his hand to the Ancient One magician, and after receiving a nod from the Ancient One magician, he turned and left. When Lin saw this, he extended his hand to the Ancient One magician, and when he saw the Ancient One magician stretched out his hand to signal to sit down. Immediately walk across to the Ancient One magician, sit cross-legged on the mat, watch the Ancient One magician wash the tea, brew, seal the pot, and then use the tea clip to pick up the cup and put it on the saucer. Poured a glass, handed it to myself, and poured myself another glass. The whole process took a long time, but Lin, who was a little embarrassed and didn't know how to speak, became calm. Looking at the tea in the cup, Lin quickly picked it up and took a sniff. Fragrant. Then take a sip and close your eyes slightly, as if you are feeling something sweet with a slight bitterness. Unforgettable. Even though Lin didn't drink much tea in the previous life, when he drank this cup of tea, he could taste that it was a good cup of tea. Taste slowly for a while, feel the peace in your heart, and then slowly open your eyes. Looking at the Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One in front of me, I couldn't help but praise. Good tea. Really good tea. People like me who don't drink much tea can clearly feel that this is a good cup of tea. Thanks to Sorcerer Supreme for giving me this cup of tea. Hearing Lin's praise, Ancient One Magician also showed a smile on his face and said slowly. Since you like Lin, I'll give you 5 taels here. After drinking, if you still want to drink, you can come to Kamar Taj to find me. As soon as Lin heard it, she immediately realized the gesture of Ancient One Magician, and said softly. In that case, thank you Ancient One Magician, I will definitely taste the tea you sent me, slowly. In return, I give the Ancient One Magician a present. Saying that, Lin stretched out his palm, and with a thought, a transparent sphere emitting strong energy fluctuations instantly appeared. In the sphere, there is an energy oscillating back and forth, colorful and looming. Exactly. The power of the source. Taking the power of the source as a gift was Lin's initial idea. Well, the keel has already been sent before, and it seems inappropriate to send the keel again. Besides, Lin never intended to prostitute, because the cost of prostitution is often huge amounts of. How much more will be done for the Ancient One Magician? How much will it cost? For a top boss like Ancient One Magician, begging him to do things, gifts must be prepared. Otherwise, why do you come to help you for no reason, just because you are good looking and have a good impression of you? Even so, who would have nothing to think about dealing with the dimension Mephisto, against it? Only the Ancient One Magician, who fights with Latitude Mephisto every day and does the right thing, will take action. Therefore, the gift must be prepared, and the value should not be too low. If it is low, it will appear insincere. And the power of the source, just can. The power of the source, which has been systematically refined, is of great value. It is no weaker than the source of Mephisto in those dimensions, or even higher. Moreover, the original longevity of the keel, and even the effect of resurrection, is also included in it after purification. It definitely has a great effect on beings like the Ancient One Magician who cast spells with the help of the dimensional Mephisto. Able to repair body damage. No matter how bad it is useless to the Ancient One Magician, but it is also of great help to her disciples and grandchildren. Therefore, the power of the source is very suitable as a gift. After Ancient One Magician saw the ball in Lin's hand, he glanced at it and nodded slowly. I already know your purpose. In place of Kamar Taj's magician, I thank you. Your gift will help them a lot. Well, it seems that the power of the source extracted from the keel is indeed useless to existences like the Ancient One Magician. Then, Lin put the source power in his hand on the table and continued to listen to the Ancient One Magician. About Dormammu, I can take care of it. Although I can solve the dark power he left behind, if you appear in front of him, you will still be discovered by him. Quote. You have entered his impression. So, after the problem is solved, as long as you sway in front of Dormammu and his followers for no reason, it will not have much impact. Speaking of which, a faint smile flashed in Ancient One Magician's eyes. In this regard, Lin did not notice, but said very excitedly. That's it, Ancient One Magician. As long as this dark energy is resolved, I can handle other things here. Well, isn't it Dormammu? I can't provoke it now, and I can't hide it. As for his followers, there is no one under his command, just send someone to hang them. Wait until he becomes stronger. Humph. It's not certain who kills who. When the time comes, Dormammu must be pulled out of his dark space, and what is a barbecue feast for him? Relevant thoughts flashed through Lin's mind, and he didn't study it further. The most important thing now is to solve the problem. Immediately, Lin looked at the Ancient One Magician with anticipation. Seeing this, Ancient One Magician stood up with a slight smile on his face. At the same time, seeing this, Lin also stood up and continued to stare at Ancient One expectantly. Ancient One stretched out his palm and hit Lin's chest directly. In Lin's eyes, the speed was not fast, but he couldn't dodge it at all. It seemed slow and fast, and it was very strange. As soon as he reacted, he found that his soul was separated from his body. Looking at his own body, Lin's mind flashed and he suddenly realized that he continued to stare at the Ancient One Magician with amazed eyes. Ancient One smiled at Lin's soul. Reach out and wave. In an instant, Lin felt like he flew out all at once, as if he flew out of the earth, out of space, out of the entire universe. Then, under the influence of a completely irresistible force, he traveled in various dimensions and in various cosmic spaces. He saw all kinds of bizarre dimensional worlds, and even the dark dimension of Dormammu flashed by. He seemed to hear an angry cooing sound in his ears. Soon, under the influence of a force, he quickly returned to Kamar Taj's tea room. He opened his palms, stretched out his hands and pinched them, only to realize that he had returned to his physical body. The scene just now, although it was very surprising in the imagination, can only be felt after the real experience. To this day, Lin can still feel her heart beating constantly, making a thumping sound. Immediately, before there was time to communicate with the Ancient One magician, he whispered directly to himself. Explore yourself. In an instant, his body was repeatedly scanned by a strange wave, and the Ancient One magician looked at him with a smile, not surprised. Soon, information emerges in the brain. In an instant, I realized that the dark power that had been entangled in the depths of my soul had disappeared. More importantly, his soul seems to have been tempered, the toughness of the soul has been significantly improved, and even the strength, sensitivity, and even mental capacity of the soul have been significantly increased. After understanding it, Lin opened his eyes, moved towards the Ancient One magician, stretched out his hand to Bo, and said gratefully. Thanks Sorcerer Supreme. My problem is solved. At the same time, my soul has been greatly enhanced. It was a great surprise to me. Sorcerer Supreme, please accept me and pay a little more. I just took a quick look and it seems that your Kamar Taj electronic equipment has not been updated for a long time. Our Shining Star Group can install the latest and most advanced electronic equipment for you to improve your quality of life. Well, definitely not trying to eavesdrop on Kamar Taj. After all, in the face of big bosses, some of his little hands and feet are easy to find. Instead, it is better not to do it and send a favor, good money, as a gift. Hearing Lin's grateful words, Ancient One magician said gently with a faint smile on his face. There's no need for that. A moderately difficult condition is more conducive to the tempering of the will. Hearing this, Lin nodded as well, and continued to speak to the Ancient One magician. Sorcerer Supreme, in that case, if anything happens to Kamar Taj, please call me. Saying that, he handed Ancient One magician his own business card. Seeing this, Ancient One accepted it directly, and then the two briefly chatted for a few more words. Lin felt it was getting late, so he raised his hand to say goodbye, and got a positive reply from Ancient One. He walked out of the tea room and said softly, Space Shuttle. With a thought, in an instant, he has returned to the Xingyao Group's own office. Feeling that the sky here was just approaching noon, a faint smile appeared on Lin's face. This time, everything went well. Trident Building, SHIELD Headquarters. Nick Fury, who was sitting in the director's office, was looking at Maria Hill in front of him with a serious expression. Hill, how is the investigation about the large energy fluctuation near the Boric building the day before yesterday in Hell's Kitchen, New York? Hill agent replied without expression. Sir, I'm very sorry. For some reason, there were basically no pedestrians near the Boric building, or that night, everyone left the Boric building unconsciously and consciously. More importantly, according to the investigation of nearby surveillance, it was found that the surveillance video has been tampered with and is already the content of 2 days ago. It is suspected that there are extraordinary powers at work. But, having said that, Hill agent paused for a moment, and then continued. According to our intelligence investigation, it was found that there was a recent transaction in the Boric building, and the identity of the person who handled it was very mysterious. After repeated investigation into the source of funds, it was found that it was related to the Shining Star Group. Who exactly doesn't know? And then there's one thing that I think should be taken very seriously. Speaking of which, the Hill agent's tone became extremely serious, as if what he said next was extremely surprising. As if he knew something, Director Nick Fury listened more attentively to the Hill agent's report 833. According to the Bureau's investigation in recent days, it was discovered that in recent days, we have been supervising the Hell's Kitchen underground forces and the meeting. Abnormal. They drastically reduced their sphere of influence. And it seems that there is a shortage of manpower, and the leading five fingers have not come out recently. After a battle, the forces were severely damaged. At the same time, according to our information investigation of the Blackstone Security Company under the Shining Star Group, it was found that the nearly 100 security personnel they had mobilized arrived in New York, not far from Hell's Kitchen. Intelligence suspects that there will be a lot of fighting between the two, related to previous large energy fluctuations. Hearing this, Nick Fury frowned, his brain thinking frantically. Recently, the Shining Star grouper Lynn Duncan appeared in his ears repeatedly. Phil Coulson reported seeing Lynn next to Tony. Later, it was said that Lynn played a great role in saving Pepper. What surprised him even more was that after Pepper rescued, Lynn sent a female robber or agent to S.H.I.E.L.D. It was her former secretary, Emily. It is said that when Emily arrived, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff took a special look and confirmed it. It's her, not wrong. Then the intelligence department was sent to obtain information from Emily's mouth, and it was found that the other party was an agent from Shang country, and was dispatched to Xingyao Group as an agent to obtain confidential information. Dude, if Lin knew about this, he would be stunned right away. S.H.I.E.L.D. is worthy of the Snake Shield branch, and 80% of the entire intelligence department is from the Snake Shield. It was a waste of money to give away, and maybe now it has been changed again and sent to where to complete the task. As for the monitoring information, he had already asked Vera to change it without leaving a trace. Unfortunately, the use of large sums of money is bound to leave traces, which is the inevitable result of the financial system. That's where the folks at S.H.I.E.L.D. found traces. However, the people in the hands and the meeting did not collapse and split. Lynn would definitely be very interested if she knew. Director Nick Fury said in a deep voice after hearing the Hill agent's report. Hill, please let the operations department investigate the hand again. Let's see if we can get specific information from him. Then he reached out for Hill to leave. After the Hill agent left, Nick Fury picked up the document in his hand, flipped through the names of the Shining Star grouper Lynn Duncan, and frowned. He knew the strength of the Hand Association. I heard from the Hill agent just now that most of Blackstone Securities personnel were unharmed, and only 5 people were missing and suspected to be dead. This ACFI is enough to show that the Shining Star Group or Lynn's mastery of power should not be underestimated. A week later, Shining Star Group, the chairman's office. Lynn, who was laying a yoga mat on the ground and trying to meditate, reluctantly opened her eyes. Since entering to meet the Ancient One magician and the other magicians of Kamar Taj. With her superb dating skills, Lynn quickly got together. Well, mainly because he has money and buys too many gifts. As the saying goes, it is not surprising that many people are polite. A lot of gifts are brushed up, and the favorability level is not rising. So, I asked the magicians who were familiar with him, such as Mordo Magician, Caecilius, etc., about their magician cultivation methods, to see if there was any reference value. As a result, it may be because Caecilius knew his own strength and the attention of the Ancient One magician, so he didn't have too many scruples. Shared their meditation method directly to him. So, after getting the meditation method, Lynn began to practice with great interest. Well, although he followed his words, he still cultivated with his heart, relying on his passion for magician in his previous life. Pity. It may be the ability to pull the cross, meditating for 3 or 5 days without any results. I asked Caecilius, the other party said that it was normal, and it usually took several months to feel a significant increase in spirit. Well, hearing this reply, Lynn's meditative enthusiasm was drained in one fell swoop. When you have this time, it is better to use the words and follow the law to give yourself a lot of blessings. No matter how bad it is, please the Ancient One magician and let him do another soul training for himself. Tut tut. Thinking of this, Lynn immediately stood up, put away the yoga mat, and decided to give up the so-called meditation practice. This broken thing takes too long, and the effect is very general. It is a waste of life. So he began to figure out how to please the Ancient One magician. It's absolutely amazing to have a big guy who is not hostile to him to teach himself. Unfortunately, 80% of him can't learn the magic inside, and his words are already very magical when he uses them, and it is really a waste of time to learn again. Otherwise, you can try Dang Sorcerer Supreme and see what it feels like. Similar thoughts continued to arise in Lynn's mind, and gradually began to plan things about Kamar Taj. Well, nothing else, mainly because Kamar Taj's magician system is good, and it does have great value in the absence of other mature and extraordinary systems. Suddenly, there was a soft voice in Lynn's ear. Sir, the trace of Miss Sky Daisy has been found. Would you please send someone to send an invitation? Sir, the trace of Miss Sky Daisy has been found. Would you like to send someone to invite me? Hearing Vera's message notification, Lynn briefly thought and said, being not. Collate her current information into a report and send it to me. With that said, Lynn started to turn on his computer and read slowly. Sky or Daisy's trail, after chatting with Gordon the Eyeless that day, began to search for Vera. As a result, because even his own vague understanding of Sky's identity information, coupled with the fact that the other party has no parents, has doubts about his identity, he has run away from home many times, and even he is an online hacker who forged his identity information. The process of making Vera's search caused a lot of trouble, and it has not been found until now. For Sky himself, Lynn is somewhat hesitation. Because Sky is not like Frank and Jessica, there are not many factors involved, and their sense of morality and justice, although there is, but not very strong. But Sky was different. Originally, he was involved with the issue of Inhumans, and he also understood some of his experiences based on his previous life. It is found that Sky's emotions are very rich. In other words, in case someone blows a whistle in her ear, beat the drum. I dare not say that I would defect directly. But it is very likely that it will be rotten directly, and the possibility of defecting is not even ruled out. It is equivalent to finally carefully cultivated a talent, and as a result, he went to another power. Like S.H.I.E.L.D. or Inhumans, Lynn's hard work would be in vain. See you all, Sky just joined S.H.I.E.L.D., and when he found out about his boyfriend, he sold S.H.I.E.L.D. at once. If it wasn't for Phil Coulson who had always trusted Sky, and had been doing her job, helping her like a daughter, he wouldn't have been completely relieved. But now Lynn can't do it, he can't invest a lot of time, energy, even emotion for a vibe girl. Thinking of this, Lynn shook his head slightly. Therefore, Lynn decided to study it carefully, but no matter what, he must first pull to his side as a medium for the communication of the Inhumans. Carefully read through the general experience of Sky in the years organized by Vera. Good guy, I have faked more than a dozen identities alone. There are 6 adopted families, and they escaped 7 times by themselves. The last time they escaped, they left directly. Now he has joined a hacker group called Rising Tide, which claims to be promoting justice and revealing the truth. As a result, this Rising Tide organization, Lynn also understands, the leader is purely to trade the intelligence they have collected to make money. It's like being sold. Also made a boyfriend, Miles, who taught her hacking skills. At present, the two can be said to be in full swing. Tut tut. The more Lynn looked at Sky's message, the more she felt like she was a sticking point. It is basically impossible to make her completely calm in a short period of time. Maybe join Lynn's side, or to extract information. Give Lynn a Trojan horse. But after thinking about it for a while, Lynn gradually came up with a plan. For Sky, he came up with a solution. Immediately, he ordered Vera next to him. Vera, send Sky an invitation to meet and say that I have information on his parents. By the way, don't forget to reimburse the airfare. I almost forgot, they're so poor now, don't even think about taking a plane. Sitting in Los Angeles, they probably don't have enough money to go on a hike. The time it takes is absolutely massive, Lynn, he can't wait that long. Okay, mister. Hearing Vera's soft female voice, Lynn nodded slightly, then closed her eyes and tried Kama-Taj magician meditation again. As long as you try very hard, you can achieve anything. He has confidence in his ability to be blessed with the Dharma spoken out. Anyway, there is nothing wrong now, and there is definitely no harm in meditating a lot. Meanwhile, the United States, Chicago, the Nunes Hotel. After a long wandering, no, it should be said that the Sky and Miles hiking. I just checked into the hotel late last night. Therefore, even though the sun has risen high, the two of them have been in a deep sleep. Sudden. Bell. 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 As soon as the phone rang. Sky, who was sleeping soundly, subconsciously took out the phone next to him and hung it up. Continue to sleep. Well, she's the alarm clock. Result. The phone started ringing again. This time, she didn't care at all. Just ring it, no matter who it is, wait until you wake up. Then, the two of them's computers began to play cell phone ringtones. The two who were sleeping suddenly woke up and looked at each other, knowing that this time was in trouble. Phone calls are fine and normal. However, their computer was hacked. You must know that they are hackers, and they have taken a number of protective measures for their computer. He was even manipulated, and even played the ringtone of his mobile phone to remind himself to answer the phone call. Immediately, Sky turned on his phone while putting on his clothes. No matter who it is, let her know that she dares to treat them like this, and if she catches the other party, she must beat him severely. Soon, the phone boots, meanwhile, after the signal is restored. Immediately, a cell phone rang. Sky quickly clicked to answer. Well, her mobile phone is a smartphone produced by Xingyao. It was a gift from her boyfriend Miles. After the phone showed that the answer was successful, Sky cursed loudly. Who are you? Are you looking for trouble? How dare you hack our computer? Don't let us catch you. Or else, believe it or not, I'll just run to your house and beat you up. Jing. Well, Sky, who had just been interrupted, looked a little excited and angry, and began a long process of abuse. The other side of the phone was silent, letting Sky curse loudly. As time slowly passed, Sky's scolding voice became smaller, and gradually calmed down. Seems to perceive to Sky's emotions to calm down. There was a soft female voice over the phone. Hello, Miss Sky, or Miss Daisy Johnson. My boss wants to invite you to meet. Just a chat with you, your mother, Ms. Jiang. After hearing the voice from the phone, especially after her mother's message, Sky was a little excited and asked directly. What? You know my mother? Is her name Jiang? Where exactly? How to find her? A barrage of questions was preached to the phone like a cannonball. Next to Miles, Sky, who was feeling more and more emotional, stepped forward to hug her and began to comfort her slowly. Soon, Sky's mood calmed down. There was another voice over the phone. Miss Daisy, your question has been recorded, and the specific answer can be directly asked by my boss. You have already transferred 5,000 yuan to your account as a reimbursement for the travel expenses. If it's not enough, you can always contact me. My boss, welcome to Los Angeles. Saying that, the phone hangs up directly. Then, the phone displays two text messages. One is the location information, and the other is the transfer information of 5,000 meters. Sky and Miles looked at each other after seeing it. The next day, in the morning, in the Los Angeles Business Center, Shanlin Cafe. Sky and Miles, who were sitting in a box, were a little anxious. This place looks expensive, they never touch it. At the same time, the person who invited them to meet has not come out until now, and they have been waiting for nearly half an hour. It made them feel a little anxious. Originally, Miles felt a little hesitant about the invitation sent on the phone. Because with the hacking skills of the two of them, it is impossible to investigate who hacked their computer, or even where the call came from. There is no doubt that the technology possessed by the other party is absolutely very strong. But as soon as Sky heard her mother's message, she decided she had to come to Los Angeles anyway. Even if this is a trap or a swindle, try. 840. Well, women who are blinded by emotions are more reckless. Miles also let her go. After all, the other party even transferred the money, which means that there should be no great malice, but just in case, he also went with him to take care of Sky. As a result, they booked air tickets that day, took a plane, rushed to Los Angeles, simply found a hotel, and washed up. According to the location of the mobile phone, I came to the number 49 box of this Shanlin Cafe and waited. Result. After waiting for half an hour, no one came. No one answered the call. If it wasn't for the advance transfer, they really thought it was a prank. Time passed slowly, and soon another 10 minutes passed. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door, and then the box door was opened. A very handsome man in a blue suit came in and gave them a trick roar. Sky and Miles looked at the very familiar person in front of them and couldn't help but say roar. Lin Duncan. As hackers, they are very concerned about Lin Duncan. In particular, Lin said that the Xingyao smartphone system he developed by himself, they tried to crack it, but found that the technology is really strong and difficult to crack. In addition, an open-source smartphone system was launched later, which was developed by Lin himself. In addition to a series of well-known mobile phone software, Lin has participated. All of a sudden, Lin became a godlike existence in the circle of all hackers or programmers. Sky and Miles, as hackers, are no exception, and even worship him as an idol. Immediately, he was a little cautious, as if the gods had come to the world and stood in front of him. Lin looked at the surprised and adoring eyes of the two, and a faint smile floated on her face. He knew his status in their eyes. This is why he is willing to communicate with Sky. His identity is the best way for 2 or 3 people to build trust. Lin watched and stood up. The two of them gestured to sit down, and then ordered some coffee, food, etc. to the waiter next to them. Looking at the figure of the service staff leaving, Sky said excitedly. I didn't expect it to be you. You know, if you wanted to see me, you would have come a long time ago. The same is true for Miles next to him, but after all, he is a man, and his mood is more stable. In response, Lin also smiled and said softly. Nice to meet you, Miles, Sky, or maybe Daisy, Johnson. When he heard the name Daisy again, Sky immediately came back to his senses and remembered the purpose of his visit. Mr. Lin, I received a message from someone you sent earlier, and you are aware of my mother's trace. Is that true? And, was my original name Daisy Johnson? Who is my father? How is Roar called? Do you know where he is? Hearing a lot of questions from Sky emerge from his mouth, Lin squeezed his hand slightly when he saw this, signaling Sky to stop and ask questions. Then he said calmly, Sky, your real name is Daisy Johnson, and you are the child of Mr. Hyde Johnson and Ms. Jiang. A few days ago, I saw one of your mother's subordinates, and I heard that your mother was looking for you, but no trace has been found. So I asked people from Shining Star Group to participate in the search process, so I found you and Mr. Miles. As for your father, Mr. Hyde Johnson, I'm very sorry, no trace of him has been found. But according to my information, your mother knows where your father is. Speaking of this, Lin's tone changed slightly, and he said a little more seriously. It's just that I don't recommend you ask. Because, there is a conflict between your father and mother, and it is very big. It's going to be troublesome if you get caught up in it. Luo. Hearing this, Sky was obviously a little excited and asked quickly. Mr. Lin, is my mother really looking for me? Have you met my mother? How can I contact her? Seeing that Sky's face became a little excited again, Miles next to him felt a little wrong, and began to pat Sky on the back, trying to calm her down. And at the moment, the coffee and food that Lin ordered before have also been served by the waiter. Lin glanced at Miles, who was comforting Sky, and then gestured to the waiter next to him. Saw the waiter put the coffee in front of the three and put the food on the table. Lin gestured towards Sky and Miles, and said lightly. You can try the coffee and food here first. I've eaten here before and it still tastes pretty good. Saying that, he started drinking coffee slowly, watching Miles comfort Sky. Soon, Sky calmed down, and Miles on the 5.8 side saw Sky and wanted to ask again. The secret passage is not good, so he asked in advance. Mr. Lin, if that's the case, when can we see Sky's mother, Ms. Jiang? Lin glanced at Miles next to him, nodded slightly, and said slowly. I was waiting for your mother to send someone to find me. Unfortunately, I haven't even had a phone call until now. So, I can take you to find your mother. Just in time, I know where your mother is. Speaking of this, Lin's tone was clearly smiling. Well, since the Inhumans haven't replied yet, don't blame yourself for coming to the door. Then, Lin said again. Just in time, there is one thing I want to ask your mother for. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and support our channel.